With Trump, the Senate tonight voting to end Trump's Iran war in a major rebuke to the president, as key parts of the agreement with Iran are in total doubt tonight. And is Zohran Mamdani the new kingmaker? The New York City mayor facing a big test in races tonight as Trump endorses both candidates in a runoff so that he wins either way. Plus, more breaking news in the Nancy Guthrie investigation. Let's go out front. And good evening, I'm Erin Burnett. And out front tonight, the breaking news. Trump hit with a huge blow from Republicans. Today, Republicans joined Democrats and they passed a resolution to check Trump's war powers, which is the sharpest pushback on Trump's 116-day war that's come from Congress. Came after the House had passed a measure to end Trump's war in Iran, but nothing like that's come from the Senate until now. And the White House is dismissing it. They're saying, I quote, concurrent resolutions do not go to the president and have no force of law. A rather formal response from this White House, a little bit out of character. And while it may be a symbolic vote, it is incredibly significant because up until now, as I indicated, the vote has failed every single time. So now you've finally reached a point. You've crossed a Rubicon. The majority of senators saying no, they've had enough. And today's challenge comes as there are even more questions tonight about what exactly President Trump even agreed to when it comes to the so-called agreement with Iran. For one, the Iranian president today said that Iranian missiles, are not part of the agreement. He said, quote, the discussion over our missiles does not exist in the memorandum of understanding, and it never will. Well, that is, a really direct thing to say, because it's also confusing because Trump said when he launched attacks against Iran, right, one of the main reasons when he came out and spoke to this country when the war began, he said that limiting Iran's missile program was one of the core reasons for his choosing to go to war.
Our objectives are clear. First, we're destroying Iran's missile capabilities, and you see that happening on an hourly basis, and their capacity to produce brand new ones, and pretty good ones they make.
Now, even separate from this so-called agreement, Iran does still retain more than two-thirds of its pre-war missile stockpile. There's also Iran's nuclear program, and the question of whether Iran has agreed in all these memorandums and deals to inspectors.
Iranians are saying there's no scheduled visit for the IAEA inspectors. Is that part of your agreement?
They're wrong. They're wrong. They know they're wrong. They told us inside, and we have it down 100% inspections.
But Iran's adamant that no agreement was made. Now, Trump is also touting the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. Now, while nearly 24 ships have crossed the strait in the past 24 hours, according to marine traffic data, that's a fraction of pre-war levels, right? On average, before the war, 138 ships crossed the strait per day. And the reality is that now the strait is in flux and Iran controls it. Iran even says it intends to collect fees for what it calls maritime services offered alongside Oman in the Strait of Hormuz once the waterway is opened. Even as Trump is posting, there will be no tolls in the Hormuz Strait for 60 days during the ceasefire, and there will be no tolls after the 60-day period has expired. Well, whatever you want to call them, he's saying tolls, they're saying sorry. Two totally different stories again. But as Trump's agreement with Tehran does seem to be in jeopardy, the message from his fellow Republicans is clear, and that is end the war now. Manu Raju is out front live on Capitol Hill beginning our coverage tonight. And Manu, look, when you see this vote, they had never had the votes, never been able to do this until today. So symbolic or not, it does appear to be a significant rebuke to Trump from his own party.
Yeah, and it's coming from both wings of the Republican Party. Some of the more moderate members joining with Democrats today to essentially say that Congress needs to have a say in order for this war to continue, especially if Trump wants to escalate things with Iran. Moderate members like Senator Susan Collins of Maine in a difficult re-election race, Senator Lisa Murkowski, someone who breaks with the president periodically. Also Senator Rand Paul, a more conservative member, a libertarian-minded member, someone who breaks with his party on issues of foreign interventionism. And then Senator Bill Cassidy, someone who Trump effectively pushed out of the Republican Party by supporting his primary challenger just last month, sending a message to Trump. Then you're hearing criticism from the more hawkish wing of the GOP, people who don't think this deal cut with Iran, this MOU, will lead to anything good for the United States, including on the question of easing sanctions. What one congressman told me today could make Iran even stronger.
I'm concerned about it. They're getting money that they can use. All money's fungible, and this money can help support their terrorism. I feel like in this case, it appears to me that the president wanted a deal really bad before the November election, I get it. But in the end, I think Iran's getting the better end of this.
And that's a concern from a lot of Republicans on both sides of the Capitol, House and Senate Republicans. And tomorrow, Aaron, is going to be a day in which Trump will be in front of those same Senate Republicans in a closed-door lunch where he will be discussing a range of issues. And undoubtedly, he'll have to defend this deal that he cut with Iran. Will any of those Republican senators actually challenge him behind closed doors? That's going to be a big question, because there is a lot of concern about his handling of this war. And some of them now want to have Congress have a say if he decides to escalate things, Aaron.
All right, Manu, thank you very much, and everyone's here with me. Essie, I mean, it's 106 days, 16, days in. So, I mean, any day prior to now would have been a good day for Republicans to decide how they felt about the war and stand up for it. But we'll take day 116 is when it happened. How significant do you think it is that they had? It's a symbolic step, okay?
Yeah.
Let's be honest, the White House is correct about that. But they did it.
Well, I think it's an acknowledgement of a few things. I think when you have two parties in an agreement saying opposite things, there's not an agreement. There's no agreement to be had. For another, I think Republicans are remembering their objections to the JCPOA, some of which were that it didn't deal with its ballistic weapons, and it didn't deal with Hamas, Hezbollah, its proxies. This doesn't really either. I think they're worried about that. And then thirdly, I think the acknowledgement of the political environment in which this is happening and the polling around this war. Very few people wanted this war. Once we were in it, very few people wanted it to continue very long. Now that it's quote unquote over, very few people are happy with the deal we got and think we're in a better position than we were. All of these people are acknowledging that because it's a midterm election year. And I think they are very aware of the calculus here.
I mean, 78% of Americans say Trump should end the conflict now.
Yeah.
And you know, honestly,
but wait.
surprised it's that low.
I mean, is it over? Is it not over? Or I mean, I don't know where we are anymore. I don't think Trump knows where we are anymore.
Well,
I don't know what
to agree on anything. So I don't know what they signed.
I mean, they clearly, not an agreement because every part of this agreement seems to be disputed. Right. Are there tolls? Are there not tolls? Is it straight open? Is it not open?
Inspectors, no inspectors.
Inspectors, missiles, no missiles. I mean, at this point, there is no clarity at all about what it is that this is supposed to be about. And so I think what you see in Congress is a few GOP senators getting some spine because Trump has upset them. And then beyond that, an acknowledgement that this is a lame duck Congress. And this is more, I think this is more about that there's really nothing that they can pass at this point except these sort of symbolic things. But it is a warning to Trump that his hold on his own party is ebbing.
Right. I mean, Karine, I guess that's one thing you can take away from it. And again, it's for Republicans. That's what you need, and that is standing up to him. But it isn't as if you suddenly saw this tsunami, you know, where everyone's running for the exit.
I mean, look, this is Trump's doing, right? Because a lot of these Senate Republicans are being pushed out by Donald Trump. So this is of his own doing. And let's not forget, Congress, it's supposed to be a co-equal branch of government. They're supposed to have a say on what the president is doing. They're supposed to do it together. This is what the constituency that they have hired them to do. But again, we see 4 senators, they have some spine. It'll be very interesting to see how this lunch goes with Senate Republicans and Trump tomorrow. And, you know, the other part I would say is when Trump was running in 2024, one of the things that he said, there would be no new war. And as you just stated in the polling, people do not like this. Now we are in the middle of a midterm election, and this is a problem for Republicans. It just is. And this is Donald Trump's doing.
So do you think they're going to say anything tomorrow? And also, just to be clear here, the spine is often coming from people who have been spurned. You know, by Trump.
It's true. Yeah.
Or shamed into it by the voters. I mean, about damn time. Better late than never. But it also comes with an asterisk because 2 Republicans didn't vote today. McConnell and I think McCormick weren't there.
Yeah,
so it was a 50-48 vote.
And Fetterman voted on the other side.
Right, as he consistently does. But the important part is the sea change that's happening. The politicians are catching up to where the country is. And it's an overwhelmingly unpopular war. And I think they also recognize this has been the worst ceasefire ever. And this is potentially the worst deal ever. And this is a really stinky mess that everybody wants to get away from almost more than the reflecting pool. But we've got a bigger situation, which is you can't trust anything Trump says, and you can't trust anything the Iranian regime says. And that's what makes this so dangerous, and I think underscores it. No matter what Trump says, no matter what Congress does, this is very far from over.
By the way, what you just said there, I think is really profound. it is true that we know the Iranian government has always put out propaganda.
Yes.
Yeah.
You used to know that there was a spin coming from a White House.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you could trust certain facts or certain things that they said.
Yes.
And now that is not true.
It's such a deleterious position to be in. We've never trusted Iran. We shouldn't trust Iran. And what they're saying has their particular audience, right?
Yep.
We should be able to trust what we are saying. And we don't. I don't know many people who trust the information that we're putting out. That leaves the American people in a really precarious position in an election year. Who do we believe? We can't believe our government. We don't believe the bad actors because we never have. There's no one with sort of the adult voice in the room to say, here's what's real. Here's what we know, and we're not going to get ahead of what we know. Here's where we are. No one's saying that.
And
You know what,
Congress can do something. Congress can pull the plug on the funding. They're not entirely lame ducks. They will have a defense budget to authorize at the end of the year, which includes a $500 billion plus up. And now we find out
With a
$80
massive
billion.
$80
Yes,
billion
exactly, for the
Because
war.
we also can't trust them on the money. They said $29 billion. Now it's $80 billion. But Congress can pull the plug on the funding. They can ask harder questions. They can demand hearings. They can put Pete Hegseth in the hot seat every single day until our troops come home. There's a lot more they can do. They just haven't
They've
turned
done
it
it,
up.
yeah.
I mean, that's what I was about to say. There has always been a lot more that they can do, and they have consistently shown that they are not willing to do that. And I think the most interesting thing that you can see now is Majority Leader Thune, ahead of this meeting that they're supposed to have tomorrow with Donald Trump on policy issues, he has told his members, why don't y'all speak up? Y'all should just talk to Trump and tell him face to face what you think. I mean, that does not show a sort of robust cohesion in the Republican conference, in my view.
It's not like when your boss says, you know, go into the CEO and tell him what you really think. Go ahead, you do it.
Please, feel free to say it. I mean, look, it's a political grenade for them.
Trump
right
also
now,
doesn't
for
care.
Republicans.
He's going to keep going. He's all gas, no brakes, unless he's forced to stop, and nothing has forced him to stop.
Well, also, okay, and I'm curious to people the way they get when they're in a room with him. And in that, you know, we kept getting more and more information from Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan's book, which is really incredible. I mean, did they just have people wearing wires and cameras in the drawers? I mean, there's just incredible stuff.
He talks willingly to them.
No, he talks to
No, but some of these
them,
things
too.
that they have are just
Agreed.
details coming from all sorts of people. I mean, it's incredible. But this one, Trump's executive assistant, Natalie Harp, who began working for Trump at Mar-a-Lago in the first months after he left the White House, the book writes about her. Okay, it says, Harp wrote Trump adoring letters that she left in his personal spaces, including one that read, quote, "You are all that matters to me." Okay. What do you make of this, Lulu, in the context of all the things? I'm not asking you to weigh in.
Take this first. Take this first.
But I guess what we're asking here, okay, is the way that Trump can exert control over people around him that continues to surprise people.
So I don't want to talk too much about this young woman because I think there's a real power differential there, and I don't know what that relationship actually looks like. What I can say that this anecdote does show is that President Trump requires and admires that kind of complete blind
fealty and
fealty
submission, right?
and
Yes.
submission.
That's
I
right.
mean, it's like the. I think most people, if you had an employee, because that's what she is, leaving you letters in your personal space telling you that you are the most important thing in your life, you would say, you know what, hon, I think you need to take a vacation. But he instead finds this to be incredibly affirming, and that says more about him than it does about her.
Right. Paul, yeah, I think that's an interesting point about it, though.
It's on-
that
it's on
he
brand.
he would
Definitely.
expect this and demand this.
Yeah, it's on brand. And I think it's even more troubling because it shows that he's surrounding himself with people who adore him. There are no conflicting ideas. There's no one challenging him. So if he wants to do something like bomb Iran, or he wants to do something like use a nuke, or he wants to do something like take out Venezuela, there's not a single voice around him that can offer any kind of contrast or challenge, all the way down to his assistant. Everyone is in this circle of sycophants, which is very, very dangerous.
And you see that more in this administration, this second administration that he's in than the first, right? The loyalty around him is just insane. Look, I have been part of 2 administrations. I have never seen a role like this. It is unusual to have someone basically be a human printer and only put in front of you stories that you like. Make sure you keep all the bad stuff away from him. It is so, it's a disadvantage to the American people because it is important for the president to hear both sides, the good stuff and the bad stuff. It is insane, and I have never seen anything like this. But again, it plays to what Trump likes. Pure, complete loyalty. And you see that more around him this time around, certainly than you did in the first time.
All right, all of you staying with me. Next, breaking news. We're primary night here. Final votes being cast in a primary that is testing the Democratic star New York Mayor Mamdani. Can he oust longtime incumbents? Plus, polls in South Carolina are just closing. Trump was worried about another loss. So, to make sure that he wins, he endorsed both candidates in the runoff for governor. John King at the wall with results and new details on the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie as we hear today from her daughter, Savannah. In New York City tonight, where polls are closing shortly in several closely watched races, Mayor Zohran Mamdani is now trying to oust two powerful Democratic incumbents. He's also trying to capture a third House seat. These are races that are pitting Mamdani against the top Democrat in the House, Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. And they embody the struggle, civil war, some are calling it, inside the Democratic Party that is being waged across the country. And this is Democratic socialists, okay, that's as they are calling themselves, trying to expand their ranks by taking on the party's establishment, kicking out their own incumbents. And their message is resonating with more and more voters. Harry Anton recently pointed out that Democratic socialists have a higher net favorable rating right now than Democrats do in Congress. And Jeff Zeleny is out front at a polling location right here in New York City. And Jeff, the races in New York tonight are crucial for this reason, right? It is the far left flank taking on incumbents and trying to clean their own house. It could set the direction of the Democratic Party.
Well, that certainly is Mayor Mamdani's hope, to try and attract more left-leaning candidates to serve in Congress. And the prime example of that are the endorsements, as you said, that he has made here. Really extraordinary when you think about it, endorsing rivals to Democratic incumbent members of Congress. Dan Golden in the 10th district here, and Adriana Espelot in the 13th district. Longtime incumbents, Mayor Mamdani has endorsed their left-leaning challengers. So we shall see what the voters say. But Aaron, it really is an example of what we're seeing playing out across the country. These are not majority makers, if you will, because these blue districts are likely almost certainly to send whichever Democrat wins the primary to a Congress in November. But this is not how Democrats hope to win back the majority. That is through more moderate Democrats across the country by winning over some suburban voters. But this is going to be potentially an issue for Hakeem Jeffries, as you said. He is of course, the Democratic minority leader. If Democrats win control of the Congress in November, he would be Speaker. And this is pulling his a conference to the left, but that is sort of getting ahead of things. I mean, the reality here is voters will make these decisions, but it is really driving the party, and it's a precursor to the 2028 presidential race as well. Just what types of ideology are fueling the Democratic Party here? But other questions also are hanging over this race where I am to fill a Jerry Nadler seat. He's been in Congress for 17 terms, 34 years. Will Jack Schlossberg make the cut? Of course, he's the grandson to President John F. Kennedy. There is some skepticism of that, but AI has also been front and center in this race as well. Israel, of course, has too. So a lot of ideological themes here that are playing out, but it's a test for the mayor. There's no doubt about it. We often talk about these endorsements, a test for President Trump, but for tonight, it's one for Mayor Mamdani. Aaron.
All right. Thank you very much, Jeff Zeleny. So, Lulu, how important is it for Mamdani's future? I saw someone the other day, talking about a speech at the Knicks, saying Republicans are really glad this guy wasn't born in the U.S., that he can't be president because his powers, his speech, his communication. But what's at stake tonight is his ability to pick somebody, put his hand on the lever, and have it work against his own moderate Democrat Party.
It's a big risk. What he's betting on is that the surge of insurgent anger that you saw propel him to power, that there is just a general feeling that things aren't working and that they want to see something different, is going to propel some of these same types of people, and that he can claim credit for it. I mean, what I have heard from progressive Democrats is that they need to expand their numbers. And that has been part of AOC's project. That has been part of many other people's project on the farther left, because they want to have a civil war in the party. And there really hasn't been one up until now. I mean, frankly, their numbers have been small. So Mamdani is really staking a lot of political capital on this, and it remains to be seen what happens. But it could be a lose-lose for him, because he's going to have a lot of anger in the sort of traditional Democratic circles over what he's trying to pull off here. So I'm not sure how this is all going to play out.
It is interesting, though, Karine, to the extent that he succeeds and where he succeeds, that is pulling the Democratic Party further and further left.
I mean,
not towards the kind of, moderate center where people say independence or, people are.
I mean, look, Mayor Mamdani has a lot to lose and he has a lot to gain tonight. And we are going to see how this is going to play out. But you are correct. We're seeing a primary, especially in New York, but across the country, where it is certainly going to have a say on what the Democratic Party looks like moving forward. But look, the Democratic Party is supposed to be a Big Ten party. That is what you're supposed to have differing voices. You're supposed to have different ideologies, and you're supposed to do it in a way where you're respectful of each other. And I think one of the things that we saw with Mamdani in 2025 is, the establishment was not happy that he was the Democratic nominee. And instead of bringing him in, they pushed him away and supported people who did not win the primary and did not back him. And I think that was a big mistake that the establishment made. Now what we're seeing is progressive versus moderate. You're seeing these establishment versus new voices.
Yep.
And, it's going to, and then you have special interest groups in there, whether it's AIPAC or AI interest groups. And so this is a battle within the Democratic Party, and we will see how it plays out. But I would say this one last thing.
Yep.
It is not surprising this is happening now, because there was a major loss. Democrats had a major loss in 2024. And so when those things happen, regardless of the party, there has to be a conversation of who that party is and what happens next and how do we move forward.
And it's nice that they had that conversation.
I agree.
But they did not.
I agree, and they did not. And I totally agree, and they did not. And it didn't play out in 2025.
And so now
it's playing out in 2026
now this conversation is playing out at the ballot
But
box.
something
exactly.
different
It is
is
risky.
happening here also. Like, this country has a primary problem. And New York City is ground zero for our primary problem. You're going to have less than 500,000 people as of 6 o'clock who voted in this primary to determine what's going to be the fate for 5 million voters in New York City. What's actually happened here is a great battle plan. Mamdani's already won because he's mayor, right? The question is, can he run the table? And it looks like he can, because what he's been doing is riding on the infrastructure that's been built for years in New York by the DSA, by the Working Families Party, to run the primaries and drive turnout. And they'll do that tonight. They will drive turnout. Moderates aren't going to vote. Independents like me, 1 million of us, can't vote at all in this primary. This is the most closed primary in the country. And what happens is the far left is going to run it because they can do turnout, they can mobilize people. They've got charismatic leaders like Mamdani and AOC. But this is New York.
And they're relying on people power, right? That's
but they're also relying on infrastructure. And there's been a lot of effort put into building for this moment.
But I would also say he's not on the ballot. So it'll be interesting if that infrastructure is able to do.
Remarkable
I'm
what
just saying.
Mamdani is doing, because he's mayor. He's injecting himself into federal elections. He's been here 6 months. He's not just endorsed. He has shown up at ad shoots. He's fundraised. He has helped recruit candidates. He has 2 top aides running the campaigns of 2 candidates. He is incredibly involved. If I'm a New York voter, which I was for a long time, I'd be asking, what are you doing for me? This is about, you're here to solve my problems, not remake the Democratic Party. That's one part of this that's remarkable. But then the Knicks did win. But the other thing I'll just say is...
But he had nothing to do with that.
The other thing I'll just say is I have been here before. I have been here in the early 2000s when Republicans took on Republicans and tried to purify and purge our own party. Let me tell you what happened. It led to a rise of insurgents and Tea Party people, some of whom were not very qualified, some of whom weren't even conservative. And eventually, it broke the party apart. It led to 17 people running in 2016, and someone like Trump coming in and exploiting the weakness of the Republican Party at the time. I am watching this happen to the Democrats. It is healthy to have questions about what happened in the last election. It is not healthy to go down the purity test and say, do you support Israel? Do you support AIPAC? Then you're not welcome in this party. And breaking up the party and weakening it, which is exactly what's happening.
So can I?
So I don't think
But
this
it's the rise of the extremes on the left and on the right.
It's
And
the
this is an
Latin
example of how the far left
Americanization of American
is
politics.
seizing power.
But when someone like
in a playing
Chevalier
field.
says,
would
no
say-
deportations,
But
no
here's-
prisons, that is beclowning the Democratic
That's
Party.
one of the people that he
That is an
endorsed
unserious
against Hezbollah.
solution to a very real, both practical and political problem.
Look, I think, look, these conversations need to happen. They need to happen in a respectful way. That just has to happen in a respectful way. But in the general election, it's not going to be about this. The American people care about the economy. They care about how they're going to pay their rent. They care about their health care costs. So it's going to be interesting to see if
So why are they
Democrats-
only just talking about
because
AIPAC?
Because we're in the primary right now.
Right, but
we're in the primary, and
this is incredibly different.
This is not a general election strategy.
This is bad.
This is not a
And
general.
that's what but I am saying the same thing. In the general election, it's going to be interesting to see what is going to be the message for the Democratic Party, because voters are watching. They're watching this.
But most of them aren't actually voting. Only 500,000 are going to vote, and Mamdani, I think, is going to roll tonight. It's going to solidify his power. He'll have more power in city government. He'll have more power in Congress.
I don't think
But
he's
that
gonna
power
do
will
well
be
tonight.
limited. It will still be
Well,
limited.
it remains
but
to be
he
seen.
will have more
It
power.
remains to be
after
seen.
tonight.
I mean, he has the
I don't know.
most
For me,
the most to gain and
For
the
me,
most
the
to
most
lose.
interesting race is the one with Chevalier
Yeah.
against Espaillat. Because
Yeah.
when Espaillat
Yeah, yeah,
came
yeah.
in 2017,
Northern Manhattan, Bronx.
Manhattan, Bronx. But when he came in 2017, he's the head of the Latino caucus, and he was touted himself as this new person coming in, that he wasn't, he had been born an undocumented immigrant, had come, and he was this fresh breath of fresh air. He's now 71. It's 9 years later, and he's looking like the past. And now this woman is coming in at 32, 33 years old, running to his left. I mean, what this says is that this is about not only some of the issues that we've been discussing, it's also generational. There is a feeling that people are too old and that they want new solutions, people that represent them. And you saw that when Mamdani got voted in. He got voted in on the youth vote. So you can't ignore the generational shifts that we are seeing across
But that doesn't
this
always
country.
apply. If you look at New York 10, where Brad Lander's likely going to take out Danny Goldman, they're both roughly the same age, same demographic.
Also true.
But the difference is Goldman doesn't have the Mamdani AOC DSA machine behind him, and Lander does. And that's
Well,
why he's likely
we'll see
to
what happens
It's going
tonight.
to obviously be fascinating to see. It is the petri dish for the country here, New York. And next, I'll talk to one of the candidates in these crucial races in New York, State Assemblyman Alex Boris, a man who has found himself at the center of a proxy war in this election between two of the biggest AI companies in America. Plus, the breaking news: polls have closed in South Carolina. We're about to make a projection. Stay with us.
This is all. Set bump. Panel's clear. Take them out. Stand by, brake master. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Effect. Roll your brake, please.
Republican nominee for governor in the state of South Carolina, beating out Lieutenant Governor Pamela Abbott in the primary runoff. Now, Trump had endorsed Abbott, but at the last minute, he added Wilson to his endorsement list, perhaps seeing some early polling, because he did just come off two failed endorsements in governor's races in Iowa and Georgia. Obviously did not want another loss here, so by adding Wilson to his endorsement list at the last second, he avoided that. Otherwise, obviously, he would have been the loser. John King is out front live at the Magic Wall. So, John, now it's pretty clear. We now know why Trump made that last-minute endorsement of Wilson. So what are you seeing in the results here?
Just a conservative sweep. You have two conservative candidates, lieutenant governor, but Wilson is the statewide. He's the attorney general. He's one statewide. He's the favorite of the conservative base. And you just see in the early numbers, maybe they change a little bit, but this, Aaron, is a blowout from the beginning here. So you see why the president will now tell you he had it right all along, when, of course, he didn't. The president's initial bet was on the lieutenant governor, but as he has done in some other races, and as you noted, he's had a couple of scars on his otherwise pretty good record in Republican primaries this year, but of late, he has had a couple of hits. So the late I'm for either one of them from the President of the United States, the Attorney General Alan Wilson, like I said, in a runaway right now. He's a conservative. He's well loved by the Trump base. He's a Trump person, but the President made the wrong call in the beginning, and he's going to say he got it right in the end.
So, okay, I guess he got it right. I mean, when you endorse both, you can't go wrong. Okay, there's also the race to fill Congresswoman Nancy Mace's seat that you're watching, and that's a Democratic runoff that faces a three-star Navy Admiral, Nancy LaCour, who was fired by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth without reason. She's been on this show. She's not been shy about how she was fired by Hegseth. How are voters responding tonight?
Right. You see Admiral LaCour losing at the moment by almost 10 points. This was tight out of the box as we've moved up to 23% of the vote in. Mark DeFord leading in that race. We got to wait and see how the count comes in. As you see, the vote count, it's a runoff election. One of the issues in runoffs is how do people come out a second time in an election. Pretty low turnout at the moment, 464 votes is the margin. So that looks like a huge point, right? It looks like a huge swing. Looks like almost 10 points, but it's 464 votes. So we need to wait there to see how this plays out. This is a district that includes Charleston. It includes the coast. You mentioned Admiral LaCour fired by Pete Hegseth. This is a district where you do have a lot of military traditions, a lot of retired military in this area as well. This is a likely Republican seat. There's also a runoff, by the way, on the Republican side right now that is very close, just as well. Also very close. This is a likely Republican seat in November anyway. But, Aaron, you know, in this year where you talk about, if you look at the fundamentals, it would take not a blue wave, but a blue tidal wave for this seat to be in play. But it is a seat the Democrats watch because at the moment, the Democrats think maybe you can expand the map. Now, are they optimistic they can win here? Absolutely not. But you want the strongest candidate just in case there is that big wave.
All right, so let me ask you about New York. You know, as you were getting ready, we were having a conversation here, and they were pretty fired up about what's going on here.
Yes, they were.
Mayor Zohran Mamdani, right, the Democratic Socialist political superstar of the moment, who's endorsing 3 congressional candidates against incumbents. So this is party on party. You know, internecine warfare. How big of a test is this for Mamdani's power over Democrats? His drive to redefine the party as a democratic socialist party?
I think your panel had it right. Very early in his term as mayor, he is making a national flex here. Now, he's making it in the state of New York and in New York City, where a Democratic socialist, maybe, Dan Goldman is the incumbent. Brad Lander is Mamdani's choice here against a Democratic incumbent. That's a shot at the Democratic establishment. Then you come up here. This is the 12th district. And then you come up here again. Espaillat is an incumbent, a prominent Democrat, and his candidate is at the top. We don't have votes here until after 9 o'clock. Again, it's a shot at the Democratic establishment. There's also a third race down here in the 7th district where the incumbent, Congresswoman Velasquez, is retiring, but the borough president was her choice, and the mayor said, no, I have my own choice here, a Democratic socialist. So this is an anti-establishment, anti-Washington establishment play by New York City's mayor, running against some power brokers in New York City, also some national power brokers, saying he wants to influence the party in the city tonight and then nationally as we head into 2028. Will it work? We will see, but it's certainly a big effort by the new mayor to flex.
So can we talk about this nationally? Because, you know, we were referring to Harry Enton looking at polling about Democratic socialists being more popular than Democrats when you look at Congress. But you travel all over the country, John. So this idea of democratic socialism, which is, by the way, a very amorphous concept and doesn't really seem to have a clear definition, you know, depending on who you talk to. But is it limited to just big blue cities, places like New York, or is this something bigger?
It is most powerful in blue cities. Washington, D.C., where I'm standing right now, likely to have a Democratic Socialist mayor. She won the primary, is heavily favored. Possibly in Los Angeles, where you're going to have a Democratic Socialist running against the incumbent Democrat, Karen Bass, in November there, possibly there in a city. But here's what you do see. Graham Plattner once identified as a socialist in Maine. He doesn't use that label anymore, but listen to him. He runs on Bernie Sanders' agenda. He talks about revolution. Abdullah Syed, one of 3 Democrats running for Senate in Michigan, favored in the polls right now, says he's not a Democratic socialist, but he's certainly a very left, liberal Democrat, and he runs on the Sanders agenda. So we're seeing more of this across the country, and some Democrats are worried what you can sell in New York City, you cannot sell in the heartland. We're going to see, Aaron.
Yeah, we certainly will. All right, thank you very much, John King. And next, new details in the search for Nancy Guthrie, as Savannah Guthrie has a new message for her mother's captors tonight. And we are counting down until polls close in one of the biggest and most expensive House races ever. New York State Assemblyman Alex Boris facing a JFK grandson and other big names. He's going after AI. He's next. New York, where $26 million has been spent in a primary, the second most expensive this year. 8 Democratic candidates are competing for an open house seat. And a lot of that money has been spent in really a proxy war between 2 AI companies, OpenAI and Anthropic. And the majority of that money, the majority of that whole war is focused on our next guest, a former engineer at the tech company Palantir, who has centered his campaign on safeguarding against AI. And he is out front now, the Democratic candidate for Congress in New York State Assemblyman Alex Boris. And Alex, I appreciate your time. So obviously all eyes are on New York and so many important primaries tonight, perhaps none more so than the one that you are in the midst of. And obviously there's been early voting, but people have been voting throughout the day today. Polls are about to close. How do you feel right now?
We feel great. We've had enthusiasm and excited voters all throughout this district. People are realizing that the old ways aren't working and are excited to try something new. And we are building this big tent coalition of people throughout the district. Nearly all of labor, every LGBTQ group that's endorsed in this race has endorsed us. We have an incredible coalition. We're feeling really confident going into 9 p.m.
All right, so you talk about Big Tent. We just had a ferocious conversation here about the Democratic Party and Big Tent, and at the same time that you have this battle going on within the Democratic Party for the soul of it. Now, the mayor didn't endorse in your race, okay? He did endorse in several other races in New York for Democratic Socialists, not for Democrats, okay? Just to be clear, you are a Democrat. You are not a registered Democratic Socialist. But this is a schism in your party. Do you think that the rise in Democratic Socialists and Democratic Socialism as a concept is a good thing?
Well, I think democracy is a good thing, and that involves having people advocate for different views. I don't agree with DSA on all that they advocate for, but I welcome activists becoming a part of this process and having these conversations. You know, the mayor hasn't endorsed in my race, but he is a voter in this race, and we had a really friendly conversation before he went and he cast his early vote. But our race is focused much more, as you mentioned, on the role of AI and the impact that that's going to have on people's lives, and that's not a left or right issue. It's sort of a different paradigm than where we viewed politics, but more people getting involved in a variety of different views, I think that's a good thing.
So you mentioned AI. Obviously, it's been the core of your campaign, but your campaign has also become a proxy war in the AI war, so specifically between OpenAI and Anthropic. So when you just look at advertising dollars alone in your race, Alex, OpenAI-linked funding has spent $3.6 million against you. Anthropic-linked funding has spent far more than that for you, right? It's multiples of that, nearly $18 million. Jack Schlossberg, who is running against you for the seat, was on the show last night, and he said this to me about you and AI.
This is going to be the second most expensive House primary ever. And that is because of a bunch of AI money coming in. On the one side for Alex Boris, he's funded by Anthropic.
Okay, just to be clear, by the way, I said 18 million spent for you. It was 8 million, so I wanted to correct that. But what do you say to Jack Schlossberg, Alex, and people like him who say that you're not going to be able to stand up to an industry that has been so central to your career and to financing your campaign?
I think there's been a lot of misinformation spread both by some of my opponents, but more than that, by the super PAC that's attacking me. The timeline here is quite clear. 3 Trump mega donors, Ben Horowitz, Mark Andreessen, and Greg Brockman, the president of OpenAI, who in the last filing was Donald Trump's single largest mega donor, last summer before Jerry ever retired, founded Leading the Future with the goal of stopping any AI regulation whatsoever. Congressman Nadler retired in September. I declared in October. In November, they named me their #1 target, their #1 enemy in the country. And in December, they pledged to spend at least $10 million against me, a promise they are making good on. In response, basically the entire Democratic Party responded. As I mentioned, nearly every labor union that's endorsed in this race, progressive activists, policy experts, and yes, some people that work in tech as well that want there to be more regulation, but that hasn't affected how far I want to go in terms of actually protecting people. Last year, I passed the strongest AI safety bill in the country over Donald Trump's executive order. I followed it up this year with the strongest bill to protect kids from AI chatbots. Both of of those bills were opposed by the entire AI industry, including by Anthropic. It's just that the battle lines in this race in particular are whether we can regulate AI at all. And for that question, most people are on the side that we need some regulation.
All right, Alex Boris, I appreciate your time very much. Thank you. And of course, obviously, polls about to close, and we will see the results very shortly. Thank you. And next, new details tonight about the search for Savannah Guthrie's mother. With information about her 84-year-old mother to speak up, as we are learning new details about a note in the disappearance of her mother, Nancy, which claimed she had died.
This is a moment to tell you that we need your help. We're begging for your help, and I'm not going to miss that opportunity. And so please, if you're watching,
yes,
no matter how small, the reward is there. You can tell us. It can be anonymous. Please do the right thing for us, for our family, for our children. And we love our mom, and we'll never stop looking for her, never.
Contents of that note, the second reportedly sent by Nancy Guthrie's abductors, was kept secret for months by investigators as they were working the case. John Miller's out front now, our chief law enforcement and intelligence analyst. So, John, just to try to understand here, what are police telling you about why the contents of this letter, which was received just days after Nancy Guthrie's abduction, why the letter was held, and why it is now public?
Well, they had a number of reasons to not go out with the message that that note contained, which was Nancy Guthrie was dead, that she died in the course of the kidnapping, that it wasn't intended to be that way, and that you won't hear from us again. And the first was they couldn't verify that. They were working on verifying that.
So they didn't know if it was true at first.
Right. But they were also working on verifying that the second email came from the same place that the first email did, because the first email had information about things in the house that arguably only the kidnappers or someone who was there would have known. The other reason was they were also getting a lot of tips on that tip line, and if people thought Nancy Guthrie was dead without knowing whether that was true, that could just cause people to say, well, it's over now, and not to be thinking about, I did see something, and maybe I should call it in. And finally, if somebody was arrested and said, I'm the kidnapper, or, you know, and they said, all right, well, what did the first note say? What did the second note say? They like to hold things back that
so then
only the kidnapper
would know. But as we're here, you know, 5 months later, police have not been able to verify Nancy Guthrie is dead because they don't have a body. I mean, that seems incredible at this point. No arrests, no nothing, nothing.
It's true that it seems incredible. And, you know, what they knew from the night of the kidnapping, from the next day, was there were blood spatters on the front door. That blood was matched to Nancy Guthrie. They knew that there was some kind of struggle, that she was likely injured in that. She was 84 years old, was kidnapped without access to her medication and held somewhere. So it's not surprising or even unlikely that she might have died as a result of that, as the kidnapper's letter said. But while there's no main suspect in this case right now, and I've spoken to sources who are briefed up to the moment, while there's no particular person of interest, there's still work being done. Videos that are being gone over, AI that's been applied to look for certain things through thousands of hours, people that they looked at before that they're looking at again. But the case isn't not active. They're just hoping that, because this is now back in the news, there's that one person out there who does know something.
Will say, right.
You know, the reward's over 100,000.
And maybe someone will hear, you know, the pain and the anguish in Savannah's voice and do the right thing. Thank you all very much. AC 360 begins now.
It is primary night in America once again. Races or runoffs in 4 states this time. Polls have closed in 2 of them, South Carolina and just now Maryland. Then there's New York, where a number of well-known political names share the stage tonight, and at least one is fighting to stay on it. That one man is 2-term Democratic Congressman Dan Goldman, who represents Lower Manhattan and parts of Brooklyn. He is facing former city official Brad Lander, who is one of 3 Democratic House candidates running tonight, with the endorsement of New York Mayor Zohran Mamdani. 2 of them are challenging incumbents from the left, something the president, who's campaigning himself in Pennsylvania, made sure to mention and mischaracterized just a little.
So now, if you look at New York, we have all communists running. they're all excited. They're going to win their primaries, but I can't imagine they can beat a normal Republican. So I think it's a good thing, Muser. What do you think? I think it's a good thing. Wouldn't you like to run against somebody like that?
For the record, the candidates he's talking about are either on the progressive wing of their party, or in the case of two of them, are also Democratic socialists. None is technically a communist. Mayor Mamdani did not endorse anyone running to succeed 18-term Congressman Gerald Nadler, but it's a crowded field. It includes conservative lawyer turned Trump critic George Conway and Jack Schlossberg, who has a slim political resume but a storied pedigree. He's the only grandson of the late President John F. Kennedy, and has the endorsement of no less a political figure as former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. And in Maryland tonight, where polls have just closed, a crowded field of Democrats is running for the chance to succeed Steny Hoyer, who has been a member of Congress since 1981, back when Ronald Reagan was new on the job. Finally, there's South Carolina Republican governor's runoff. What's notable there is not that the projected winner, State Attorney General Alan Wilson, had the president's endorsement. He did, but so did the woman he defeated, Lieutenant Governor Pamela Avett. Mr. Trump endorsed her, then Wilson, when polling shifted his way. We start, though, with CNN's Jeff Zeleny in New York, where polls are open for about another hour. Obviously, Jeff, a big test tonight for how much sway the Kennedy name still has, and separately whether the mayor, Mamdani's endorsement, will help oust an incumbent. What are you hearing from voters?
Anderson, that is the central question hanging over this primary election here, as voters are still coming in at a fairly steady pace for the next hour. But the question of these mayor's endorsements, I mean, he is doing something fairly extraordinary, going against two incumbent members of Congress. Israel and the U.S. support for Israel has been a through line for many of these campaigns. But talking to voters here, that doesn't come out quite as much. Affordability is a central concern. Democrats standing up to the president, also a central concern, but the question is how to do that. So what tonight is going to reveal is a bit of a identity test, if you will, for this Democratic Party. Not necessarily if these Democrats will win in November. They almost certainly will, because these, of course, are very blue seats. But what kind of Democrats could make up the majority should they win control of Congress? And that is still very much an open question here. But it's playing out here in real time. But the mayor is inserting himself only 6 months after taking office here. So for all the talk of the president's endorsement, and if he's able to win over Republicans, we're watching that in reverse here in New York tonight. Is he able to persuade Democrats? But you mentioned the Kennedy family name. Jack Schlossberg, of course, the grandson of President John F. Kennedy. He is running in this district. He was out here right outside this polling place where I am earlier today talking to voters. There was not a long line at his volunteer stand. Much more energy, at least at this polling place, for some of his other rivals. So we will see how this ends for him. But there is no doubt that Democrats are really choosing between the middle of the road or the left. And the mayor clearly wants to have some of the left-wing ideology, the Democratic socialists here. So does that create a headache for Hakeem Jeffries should he become Speaker? We'll find out about that in November. But for tonight, at least, this will offer at least one sense of, in deep blue New York, what types of Democrats voters are looking for. Anderson?
Thanks very much. Appreciate it. John King is tracking the numbers for us. So, John, polls close a little less than an hour in New York. What are you looking for when the numbers start coming in?
So, number one, to Jeff's point, can Mayor Mamdani make a national statement? It's in New York City, Anderson. The races he's endorsed in are in this little strip. You know it better than I do. It is home to you. But there's the 10th district, the 13th district, the 7th district. As Jeff said, the mayor making a play against the Democratic establishment by endorsing Democratic Socialist candidates against two incumbents and progressive candidates against those incumbents, and then going against the retiring incumbent in the other district who had her own candidate and he endorsed there. So Mayor Mamdani is trying to make both a New York City statement but also a national statement for the Democratic Socialists and for the left of the Democratic Party at a time when its current big leader, Bernie Sanders, is 80 years old. So we talk a lot about another New Yorker, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Congresswoman, as the heir apparent. Mayor Mamdani is saying, I'm going to be part of that conversation too. It's about New York City tonight. It's about reliably blue House districts tonight, districts that are not going to change the math in November. But Anderson, there are a lot of Democrats who think, let's not have family feuds. In a year where we have the wind at our back, let's not have the left fighting the middle, if you will, in the party. But we'll see how it plays out for the mayor tonight. He's clearly trying to flex and make a big statement.
And what are we seeing in South Carolina so far?
So you made the interesting point, and the point that matters at the top of the show, in the sense that the President of the United States was about to lose. So he endorsed the other candidate, too. So he can't lose. If you endorse both candidates, you can't lose, I guess, right? This one's a blowout. The State Attorney General, Alan Wilson, is 65% right now. We have projected him to be the winner. About 25% of the vote in. Perhaps the Lieutenant Governor, Pam Yvette, will close the gap a little bit. But this is a clear blowout by two people who have been elected statewide. But he obviously runs at the top of the ticket himself as the Attorney General. He's a favorite of the conservative base. He's a favorite of the Trump voters in South Carolina. The President will say he got it right in the end by also endorsing Mr. Wilson. But Anderson, it's just a simple fact. He got it wrong at the beginning because he endorsed the candidate who is at the moment getting shellacked.
All right, John King, we'll check in with you shortly again. Joining me now, CNN senior political commentator Scott Jennings, former Trump White House Communications Director Alyssa Farr Griffin, journalist and co-founder of Lift Our Voices Gretchen Carlson, and Executive Committee Chair of the New York State Democratic Committee Christine Quinn. Christine, let me start with you. You know New York politics very well. What do you sort of expect for Mayor Mamdani's allies tonight, as well as the Kennedy?
Well, I think some of the races are going to be closer than people think. I think the race to succeed Nydia Velázquez, where it's between Antonio Reynoso and Claire Valdez, Claire being the one Mamdani's endorsed, Nydia endorsed Antonio, that is going to be a fight until the very, very end. And in that race, whoever wins, Mamdani has made an enemy of Nydia Velázquez. And she's not going anywhere, and she is a fighter herself. So I don't really understand the strategy there, because Antonio Reynoso is about as progressive. He lines up exactly the same on Claire Valdez. So some of what the mayor is doing, I think, is a big risk as it relates to governing, because we're talking about the congressional races tonight, but he has endorsed in state assembly and state senate seats all throughout the city. And just a month ago or so, he endorsed in a city council race in my old city council district, he endorsed the loser. Why he didn't need to get involved at all, and now you start off with a council member who, you know, may have a resentment or two about that. I think the Goldman-Lander race is going to be a blowout. I think Brad Lander, who's run in the Brooklyn part of that district, you know, for basically his whole life, is just better known by the voters than Goldman is. Goldman has done a great job in Washington. He's done a good job as a prosecutor against Trump, but he didn't really do the district work that was necessary to kind of be seen by the block associations and the 10 groups and the stuff like that. The uptown race with Adriano Espaillat, that's going to be, whatever happens, very tricky for the mayor, because Adriano would tell you that the mayor promised to endorse him when Adriano endorsed him right after he won the primary, and most people believe that is true. And in this business, if your word doesn't mean anything, that is a problem. So there's potentially a lot for Mamdani to gain, particularly after Councilwoman George is now the Democratic nominee as a DSA person for mayor in D.C. You can definitely say there's the potential for a D.C. role, but what I'm really looking at is how's it going to play out for governing, because that's what ultimately he and the Democratic Socialists will be judged on.
But also for the midterms and for 2028.
Yes.
So this is a huge test for Mamdani, somebody who's really flexing his political muscle. He is highly popular right now within the Democratic Party base, but he's also going up against Hakeem Jeffries, and I would argue it's a test of Hakeem Jeffries' power. You really do not wade into a primary in a midterm season when Democrats are expected to be taking back the House, very likely. This opens up so many difficulties that are just unnecessary. And if you get some of these Democratic Socialists into the House, you're going to have Hakeem Jeffries dealing with what Nancy Pelosi did before her. You've got the squad that every single person running in 2028 has to answer for what they've said, what they have done. Every candidate who's going to try to moderate learning some lessons from the loss in 2024 and 2028 is going to be answering for what these characters say. So while it may be a flex of his muscle, it does not help the Democratic Party.
I'm most fascinated by the Goldman-Lander primary. I agree with you. I think Dan's going to lose. I don't agree with much of anything he's done in Congress, but I'm surprised you sort of glossed over the main issue in this race, which is Israel. I mean, Dan Goldman is a congressman, and he's Jewish, and he went into a coffee shop this weekend in Brooklyn, and they said, "You're not welcome here anymore." Brad Lander is out speaking in mosques, telling those people that he'd like to go align himself with Ilhan Omar and the rest of the squad. Dan Goldman's only sin, I guess, is that he thinks Israel has a right to exist. And for that, that has been the principal issue in this. And you've got the mayor of New York City, Mamdani, out saying about AIPAC and Jewish Americans who have participated in our politics that they are, quote, monsters. What is happening right now in New York City, the Democrat socialist takeover of the Democratic Party, should frighten not just Jewish Americans, but all Americans everywhere, because this is the direction the Democrats are headed nationally. Look what's happening in Michigan, and it is frightening. Throwing Democrat Jewish congressmen out of coffee shops in Brooklyn, New York. It's not 1930s Germany. This is the United States of America.
And by the way, Jack Schlossberg also ran into this. He has been disproportionately asked, despite repeatedly stating his position on Israel, that he only supports defensive weapons. He can barely show up to an event without being grilled. Why? He's Jewish, as opposed to other candidates.
And I would just say that from a bigger picture here, there's a lot of talk about the fracturing of the Republican Party with more moderate, institutional Republicans versus MAGA over the last 10 years. But there's also that same fracturing going on the Democratic side, and this is proof positive tonight. I mean, I understand why Mamdani would try to take advantage of the wind behind his sails, because he did win in a landslide election as mayor. But I've talked to a lot of New Yorkers who would rather have him be fixing the problems in New York City instead of muddying the waters in a well-known seat that's going to go Democratic no matter what. So to your point, too, I think you were talking about governing later on. Like, it's very high risk for him to be involved in these situations, and I think his own constituents would rather have him fixing up the subway.
And look, I think what happened in that coffee shop, there's no question, it's unacceptable. Unacceptable. And I also should have mentioned that Goldman didn't endorse Mamdani. So, I do understand in politics how Mamdani would then not be supportive of him and support Lander. I think we need to be careful, though, because what happened in the coffee shop was unacceptable. We don't want to then, assail other people in a way implying that they are somehow acting in an anti-Semitic way. There is no, I don't think, to say, look, I did not endorse Brad Lander, but one cannot say he is anti-Semitic. He is Jewish himself. He has never acted in an anti-Semitic way. He does stand stands with the Muslim community and against attacks against the Muslim community. But I want to be very careful. We should not assail what happened in that coffee shop against Brad Lander.
It's not just the coffee shop. The mayor himself, as you said, I agree. They want him fixing up potholes and making sure the garbage gets picked up. He can't stop talking about Israel. He can't stop calling Jewish Americans who participate in politics monsters. That has nothing to do with governing New York City.
He's calling AIPAC, and I don't believe it should have been called monsters, but he's not calling every Jewish person who gets involved in politics a monster. It was directed at AIPAC. I think it was...
Are they not Americans?
But you're saying it as if he is calling every American who is involved in politics a monster. He's calling one group. I don't think he should have made that statement, but let's not over-exaggerate what he has said.
I do think it's a significant sign of the times, and you and I talked about this off air, that Dan Goldman, somebody who's a huge rising star for Democrats, he prosecuted Trump. He was somebody, a fixture of cable news, is now somebody who's going to absolutely get wiped out. He's going to lose this in a massive way, and the most significant issue has been Israel in this race. Something that, by the way, is not even the biggest focus by any means of the House Representatives right now. But I think that speaks to the moment that the country is in, but that this city is.
And I would add again, from a bigger landscape, that so few people vote in these primaries. And it's determinative of what's going to happen potentially on the national scene. Because we're going to be saying, if Mamdani picks win tonight, oh, look, socialist Democrats are taking over. And yet we're talking about thousands of people who cast a ballot. And that's
the president will certainly be saying that.
Well, yes. But
the Democratic
the reality
voters will be
is,
saying that. If the socialists win, I agree with, they're going to feel like they have the wind at their back. You're going to see Mamdani-inspired candidacies across the country. You already are. Michigan is a great example. There's a Senate primary going on there, and I think Abdul El-Sayed is ahead in that. He has a great chance to win. He's exactly like these socialist candidates in New York City. It's not just confined to a few districts here. It is spreading already, and if they win, you're going to see this inspiration for these kinds of candidacies across the country. The implications for the Democratic Party out there for 2028 are vast.
Well, and there are other implications, though, that what we Democrats should take from this and take from Mamdani's win is also the focus on affordability, right? That was what won the race. That and his amazing use of social media, I think, were the two critical things that brought Mamdani into office. And if we as a party can, whoever wins or doesn't win, really drill down down on be opposed to Trump. People in our party want there to be fighting against Trump in an effective way, but they also want us to be for something, not just against something. And we've seen in many of these candidates, Mamdani being the best example, I think the councilwoman in D.C. being another example, a clear, achievable affordability agenda.
What races outside of New York are you watching, Scott?
Well, South Carolina, the governor's race there is fascinating. It's been a Republican primary, and it had a bunch of characters in it. Nancy Mace was in it. Ralph Norman was in it. They whittled it down to two. Evitt, the lieutenant governor, who had Trump, and Alan Wilson, who's the longest-serving attorney general in the country. And, as was noted by the report, Trump was with Evitt, I think, largely as a favor to Henry McMaster, the governor of South Carolina, who's Trump's friend. But as the race was closing, it was obvious Alan Wilson had the momentum, and there was a lot of polling showing him winning. And then President Trump said he came in and endorsed them both. But this is not going to be a close race. Alan Wilson is going to win the race. So that one, Republicans everywhere have been watching South Carolina because, obviously, it's a big Republican state, and all those characters and personalities that have been involved in this race. It's going to culminate in Alan Wilson winning. And, of course, his father is in Congress, a guy named Joe Wilson, who is known to many viewers.
Gives loyalty new meaning when your candidate is losing, jumping ship at the very end.
Well, but you have to factor in that Trump will say that he won no matter what in this case. But also,
that's not how it works,
I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying that's what he will do. And also, he's had some losses over the last few weeks. Remember when we were starting in this election cycle, his candidates were creaming everyone else. He's had some losses, so I think strategically he needed to be back on the victorious side, and that's why he endorsed both of them.
And coming up later this week, there's another one of these things out there, the Senate race down in Louisiana. That runoff is coming up on Saturday. Now, he's behind Letlow, who's in Congress, but this other guy, Fleming, who's the state treasurer, he's been a Trump ally as well, and so we'll see what happens down there. So there's tonight, South Carolina, Saturday, is coming up for him as well. So it's interesting. He's got a really good record in primaries, but the South Carolina situation did raise a few eyebrows.
The old double endorsement.
Well, but the truth is they've both been allies of President Trump. It's not like one was running one way and one was running the other.
We're going to continue to follow the primary results throughout the hour. Coming up next, two reporters whose access inside the Trump White House, from Situation Room meetings to the President and First Lady's living arrangements, has now gone into a remarkable and incredibly revealing book, which just came out today. The title is Regime Change. The authors, Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan, join us next. And later, new reporting on the green water and peeling blue lining of the reflecting pool, which the president now says is the work of vandals. What government documents reportedly say instead about what's going wrong and when workers knew about it. The revelations in a fascinating new book out today about President Trump from co-authors Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan, both White House reporters for the New York Times. The book is called Regime Change: Inside the Imperial Presidency of Donald Trump. Jonathan and Maggie join me now. It is such an incredibly fascinating read. Congratulations to both of you. I want to start with a paragraph from this, which to me was kind of just an amazing paragraph. It's page 167. You write, by midway through the year, a picture was emerging of how the Oval Office operated in Trump's second term. It was of a president spending his days at the Resolute desk in a series of rolling bull sessions, accompanied by a core group of intimates. These were supplemented by a rotating cast of extras, and on any given day they could be Republican lawmakers, titans of industry, former pro wrestlers, country musicians, Gulf royals, crypto bros, or friends of felons seeking pardons. They would enter and exit the frame, with some invited to stay for meetings they had no business attending. The conversations ran fast, often straying far from the point or from anything visitors imagined. When they arrived at the White House, the president's sentences often began on one topic and ended far away. It's like the opening scene of an opera. I mean, it's like it would be an incredible stage play, just that visual.
One of the moments that we describe, and we spoke to somebody who laid out this scene for us, is, Trump having a highly classified briefing in the Oval Office, and then in comes the guy with the stone samples for the Rose Garden.
Sure.
So this was last year.
Cortina, he's always talking about like their specific stones.
Yeah, and these
terrazzo.
Right, and so these are moments that all sort of collide into each other. There is just this sort of sweeping meeting that takes place all day long, and it means that people are pulled into something, as we say, that probably they shouldn't be listening to. I mean, the Stone guy, the paper guy, had essentially walk-in privileges to the Oval, and that's just the way this White House works.
But there's an interesting contrast. That's all true, of course, and there's sort of this no delineation, no structure. But what's also true is it's actually a very secretive White House.
Much more so than the first administration.
100%.
But much more so in some ways than even the Biden and Obama administration. I'll give you an example. This memorandum of understanding that has just been published to end the war in Iran, the number of people who had seen that document in the White House and the US government, microscopic, tiny number of people before it was published. People, you have people in the intelligence community that we talk to who are essentially trying to monitor this White House almost like it's a foreign government.
Wow.
They have no idea what's going on. And there are conversations that are happening within such a small group that's running the government. When you have people like Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, doing business, they're really unstaffed. They don't rely on staff much. They basically are these sort of free agents.
Which is really unheard of from other administrations. Normally, if you're a negotiator, you would have a team of experts in the field traveling with you, going over documents behind the scenes.
But that's how you get these. I mean, we have a scene in the book where Witkoff goes to meet Putin alone, which is stunning, right? He's sitting in the room with Vladimir Putin. Steve Witkoff has no experience in diplomacy.
The ambassador's not there.
Right. He's a real estate friend of Trump's, and he's suddenly the Russia envoy. Spends 3 hours with Putin alone, and then we have this scene in the book where he's sitting with Putin in Moscow, and Putin is drawing this doodle of a 3+2, which is the territorial arrangement giving territory to Russia, freezing certain territory. And Witkoff says, "Can you sign that for me?" And Putin signs his signature, and Witkoff takes it home and gets it framed. But again, it's this, there is a contempt for expertise, there is a contempt for, it's deeper than contempt for the deep state. It's basically anyone who's been doing this for a long time, you're probably, not up to it.
Well, it gets to the next paragraph, which I want to just read to people. You say, to the extent he still cared, this is the difference of this term versus the last. To the extent he still cared about polling at all, he was seeing far fewer polls than during his first term. His advisors knew he was not receptive to being briefed on harsh realities. In his second term, unlike his first, he was willing to take breathtaking risks that could throw not only his presidency, but the Republican Party and the entire world into chaos and carnage. More than ever before as president, he was operating on pure gut instinct. Which makes what happened with Iran, it makes sense.
Yes, I mean, and we really describe that in great detail in the book, just about the lead up to the Iran war.
Talk about what you've learned, because it's not as if, there were all we played endless montages of him saying, "Oh, nobody briefed me on that. Nobody suggested that."
Well,
he was briefed.
It's not true. I mean, a couple of things are the case. Number one, he was always more hawkish about Iran than members of his own team. Now, we do not see a world where he would have gone to war against Iran in term one, but he has always been different about Iran. That's why there was the Soleimani strike in 2020, which many people around him did not agree with, did not think was a good idea, thought it was too big a risk. Now, he was much more aligned with Benjamin Netanyahu than members of his own team wanted to see, and yet the evidence was there throughout 2024 and then afterwards. He was informed of the options. There was really no one on his team who thought this was a great idea. The person who really was very vocal about it with the president was J.D. Vance, and it cost J.D. Vance with the president. But the president was informed of various scenarios of what could happen and downsides by Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, one of which was munitions depletion, one of which was the possibility that the Strait of Hormuz would have been closed. The president and the president's own Secretary of State and CIA director examined these scenarios about regime change that Benjamin Netanyahu had portrayed in this remarkable meeting in the Situation Room to President Trump on February 11th. And one of them said it was farcical. The other said, I think we can say this on air, is bullshit, was Marco Rubio's quote. The president knew all of this, and he still wanted to go ahead and try this. This was
And
his
the
decision.
idea, and this was all based on the idea that this would be quick.
Correct.
I mean, the
Right.
number of munitions
Correct.
expended
100%.
is extraordinary.
Correct.
That's right. So you ask yourself the question, how do we get into this situation where we have dangerously low supplies of critical long-range munitions? This is a national crisis, national emergency, actually, in terms of our supplies of interceptors, missile interceptors, long-range weapons. Well, if you're Donald Trump and you have a gut instinct that this war is going to be over like that, those questions become, who cares?
Yeah.
It's going to be over quick.
We're going to take a quick break. More ahead. Also ahead tonight, new reporting from Jonathan and Maggie's colleague, David Fahrenthold, on what government documents reveal about the president's claims of vandalism at the reflecting pool. Extraordinary new book out today titled Regime Change Inside the Imperial Presidency of Donald Trump. I got to read this part. You asked the president if there had ever been an American president as powerful as him. You're kind of setting a nice layup right there. He brought out a list of historical figures. This is from the book. Alexander the Great, the Caesars, William the Conqueror. They didn't have airplanes, right? You couldn't travel around. This is the president talking. Genghis Khan, Attila the Hun, Tamerlane, Napoleon, he said with relish. Hitler, Mao, Stalin. These leaders maintained power through fear, he said. Who would ever do a thing like that, right? Trump lingered on the document's central argument that each leader, however fearsome in his day, had no global reach. Their power was local, but his was not. It's remarkable.
So we asked the question because, number one, the war against Iran had started just a few weeks earlier. And number two, he had been boasting publicly about how no other president would do the things that he had done. And he had said to Tucker Carlson, at some point, I'm the most powerful president, that ever lived. I'm paraphrasing. So we put the question to him about how he sees it. And I'm going to let Jonathan tell this story because he tells it, frankly, much better than I do. So you should.
Well, it was, I think both of us found it one of the most astonishing moments we've ever had with Trump, because he hands us this document and he says it was written by a historian. And the opening line says, Donald Trump is the most powerful man who's ever existed on the planet. And it goes on to compare him to all those people you named, some of the great monsters of history, the most ruthless dictators and conquerors of history. And there was no moral dimension to it. The only point was power. And the point was he has power, but it was something he wanted us to understand, a slightly more subtle point, which was in the document, which was, it's not just that I control the US military and the most powerful economy in the world, the most powerful technology in the world, it's that I'm willing to use the power. And that was the assessment. And it was very interesting because he was relishing that company. And one thing that we've been toying with in our reporting and sort of trying to understand as we go through this book is just to try to understand, why is this term so different from the last term? And there are many reasons for that, but one of them is Trump himself is far less reactive to domestic politics. Like, his aides are trying to get him interested in the midterm elections.
He's not looking at polls in the way he used to.
Not the way he used to.
It's not it's not totally binary, it's not black and white, but he really doesn't care that much. It's small stuff. He essentially told this. It was handed to us.
By the way, the historian he's talking about is the golf caddy.
Former golf caddy,
right.
yeah,
for
Gary
golf
Player.
Right. A couple other details I just want to get in. He shows you go in to talk to him on the 13th day of the Iran war. What's on his desk? What is he poring over?
Yeah, so I think it might have been the 17th day. But so when we walk in, he's got he's holding these pictures of maple trees, and he starts talking about how he's installing maple trees around the
I'm good
White
at
House
buying
complex.
trees.
I'm good at buying trees. Then he wants us to look at his ballroom designs, which he shows lots of people, and he starts talking about the columns, and one side is in honor of Athens, another is Rome. This is what he's focused on.
In one scene in October, he's showing a visitor a model of the ginormous arch he wants to build, and he asks, should it be for what should be on top of it? He said, should it be, he mused, a large replica of his fight, fight, fight fist. So he was seriously thinking of having a giant replica of his fist
He asked someone whether they thought it was a good idea. He also was asking whether it should be bigger than the Lincoln Memorial. We have a scene in the book where he calls the French president, Emmanuel Macron, to ask him about the Arc de Triomphe. Tell me about your arch, Emmanuel. Do people jump off it, etc.? The point is, he wants to put his physical imprint not just on America but on the world.
So how much
That's
is
where
he
his
thinking
head
about
is.
legacy? I mean, is that what it
Enormous.
is?
Yes.
You have a pie chart of his brain. It's a huge slice. It's a huge slice of it.
But it is legacy in a different way than other presidents have looked at it. He had one signature accomplishment legislatively last year. It was the One Big Beautiful Bill. They used all of their political capital to get this through. And what they found themselves then stymied by and having to deal with a few days later, and we get into this in detail in the book, is dealing with this Jeffrey Epstein files crisis that was a really self-inflicted wound by the administration, but it was really because the president just didn't want to deal with any of this. And so if people want to understand how decisions are being made at the highest level of this government, this is it.
And the scene is in the Situation Room. They have convened, not the president, but everybody else around him, to talk about Jeffrey Epstein, which is this remarkable scene in the book. Jonathan Swan, Maggie Haberman, it's extraordinary work. Congratulations.
Thank you.
The book is Regime Change. Coming up next, new reporting on actual evidence, not presidential allegations, about what was really going wrong with the reflecting pool. Also, for the first time, both chambers of Congress agree on a war powers resolution to rein in the president on military action against Iran. We'll be right back. Lately that the blue chunks and green water in the reflecting pool are the work of vandals. It also reveals that at the same time that Park Service workers were scrambling to address both those problems, the president was still declaring his more than $16 million renovation a success. The New York Times says the story is basing it on newly obtained government documents. Quoting from the piece, they show, quote, that while National Park Service workers found 2 cuts in sections of foam between the pool's expansion joints, those were not directly related to the American flag blue coating that is now peeling or to the algae that has turned the pool a bright shade of green. According to the Times, the documents they reviewed describe a pair of 171-foot-long blade cuts in the pool, but do not address how they were made. The president maintains it was vandalism.
And who would think that somebody would go into a pool and take a knife and start cutting it?
But do you have proof of that?
Yeah,
they
we
have
have proof.
photos or videos?
Well, let's put it this way. When you have a 350, I think it's 350, not 250, a 350-foot slit from one end to the other, you think that's proof? You think that's
The
proof?
reporters have been down there today looking for that slit that you mentioned, and there's no evidence of
all
it.
you'd have to do is see the Parks Department. They'll show it to you. See the secretary. But I saw it. They cut it. They cut it very violently. The same thing with the floor. They cut it. And then they lifted it. They pulled it. And that's what it is.
He's offered no evidence so far, but just last month he did say that this exact kind of vandalism that he's now alleging was physically impossible.
This will last for at least 50 years, and you'll never have a leak. It's very strong. You couldn't, if you had a knife, I don't want to give anybody ideas. If you had a knife, you can't even cut it. So strong, so powerful. It's like powerful rubber.
The New York Times' David Fahrenthold shares a byline on tonight's new reporting, joins us now with more. So what does your reporting suggest about the president's claims of vandalism? What actual cuts are there?
Well, we've seen a couple different government documents talking about cuts in a part of the reflecting pool, a piece of foam that sort of helps cushion the joints between the big pieces of concrete that make up the pool. One government document we saw describes it as 20 feet long. Others describe it as much longer, 171 foot long pieces. And those government documents don't really point to any particular person. Some of them don't even describe this as vandalism. But the really important thing to know is, like, the thing that's being described as being cut here is not the thing that President Trump has said has been cut. You know, the pieces of floor, the blue paint that we see floating up to the pool, that's not what was cut at all. It was another piece of foam that, as far as I can tell, is still in place.
And how, I mean, wherever this cut was, how accessible is that to some, I mean, could somebody, is it something on the side of the reflecting pool that someone could easily cut, or would they have to wade into the pool to cut it?
That's the thing about this, is you would have to get into the pool, as far as I understand, and use a knife and find this little narrow piece of foam right under the lip of the pool and cut it. You know, cut it for 20 feet or 171 feet. It makes it a little implausible to think that somebody would have gotten into the pool and waded through the pool twice, 171 feet long. That is the case the president's making. With the police report we've seen, the one thing that they've reported to the police was only about a 20-foot cut.
So if it wasn't vandalism, what is the reason for the peeling blue coating and the algae?
The algae is easier to explain. The reason is this is water from the DC municipal water supply. Drinking water often has something called phosphate in it. It's something that doesn't harm you and me, but it's there to prevent corrosion on the pipes. But if you pour it into a giant pool, put it out in the sun, it turns into algae fuel, algae food. So that could supercharge an algae bloom. That seems to be the one reason. Also, the no-bid contract that they had given to a company to provide filtration, at least 2 of the 4 filters they gave were not working at most times. So that's why the algae was blooming. Why is the paint is peeling off is a little harder to explain. But what we can tell is that it was peeling off fairly early on, within the first 2 weeks after the pool was refilled. So long before there were public reports of this, before President Trump started blaming it on vandals, you can see that the Park Service is going, uh-oh, the paint we just paid millions of dollars for is starting to peel up.
What did you learn about the devices installed in the pool to help kill the algae?
So these are these things called nanobubblers. They're basically water purification devices. They use ozone gas to try to kill things like algae and bacteria. The company, we talked about this earlier in the week, the company that the government gave a no-bid contract to provide those things is owned by somebody who's a friend of President Trump's, a donor to President Trump, a neighbor of Mar-a-Lago. That company, they provided 4 temporary units before they were going to install a permanent unit. And at most times, between 1 and 2 of those 4 temporary units, the main thing keeping the pool clean, those weren't working. So that's a big reason why the pool's turned green and stayed green. We'll see now if it continues to be green once the permanent system is put in.
David Fahrenthold, as always, appreciate it. Thanks. Coming up, President Trump gets a significant rebuke from Congress over the war with Iran. Details of the resolution passed. I'll speak with Senator Chris Murphy, who backed the measure next. Passed plan to limit the president's war powers, directing him to remove U.S. military forces from the conflict in Iran. 4 Republicans joined Democrats in support of it: Rand Paul, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, and Bill Cassidy. Democrat John Fetterman voted no. A White House official dismissed today's vote, saying the resolution, quote, has no significance. Though the measure doesn't carry the force of law, it does reflect a measure of discontent among some Republican senators over the war and the Memorandum of Understanding, which put it on hold. Joining us now is Connecticut Democratic Senator Chris Murphy, who backed the resolution. Senator, it's obviously not the first time the Senate held a vote on this measure. Why do you think it succeeded today?
Well, this war is the most unpopular war in modern history. People know that it's a disaster for our security, but they also are feeling the impact of it. Gas prices are above $6 in a lot of places. Grocery prices are going up. And even though you have hostilities suspended for a period of time, those prices aren't coming down anytime soon. It's going to take a long time to get oil production back up to its previous levels. Transportation costs are going to remain high, which means grocery prices are going to remain high. People didn't want this war, and the effects of it are going to stick around for a long time. So I just think as time goes on, you're going to have more Republicans, especially as we get closer to the election, joining us in these resolutions to put an end to the war.
Well, critics of the measure, including those in the White House, say that because the conflict in Iran is essentially paused during these negotiations, a vote like the one that passed tonight is unnecessary. What do you say to that?
Well, I don't think anybody's sure that this war is over. This seems like a very fragile ceasefire. For instance, it relies upon Israel and Lebanon remaining in ceasefire, and at any moment that conflict could restart, which would probably cause Iran to close the strait again. So we want to just make it absolutely clear that this war was illegal, and it was. The president can't launch a war like he did in Iran without congressional approval, and that he is restrained from restarting it again without the consent of Congress. So I just don't think anybody can bet that this really fragile, really badly negotiated ceasefire is going to hang around for much longer. I hope it does, but I'm not sure we can count on it.
Do you think the U.S. is going to be able to or wants to pressure Israel to end their military operations in Lebanon?
Well, I do think that we know that it is a precondition to ending the war in Iran, and I guess I do give credit to the president that he finally realized that he had lost. I mean, that's really what happened here. We didn't achieve any of our objectives. Iran was getting stronger by the day. They had the global economy in a stranglehold, and they basically told the United States, we will reopen the strait, but only if you release all of our oil sanctions, you give us all of our frozen assets, you commit to spend $300 billion on our reconstruction, and you get Israel to stop the war with Lebanon. That was a very, very, very high price to pay, and Trump was willing to pay it because the war was just a disaster. Now, the Lebanon-Israel war needed to stop no matter what, and so I guess I'm glad that that was included in Iran's price.
Separately, you gave a speech on the floor of the Senate outlining allegations of corruption over the past 500 days of the second Trump administration. You gave a similar speech after the first 6 weeks, the first 100 days. Have you been able to get your colleagues on the other side of the aisle interested in investigating any of these issues?
No, not really. I mean, I just keep going down to the Senate floor to try to make sure that we don't normalize this. These aren't dozens of individual instances of corruption. This is a system. Right? This is what the White House wakes up every day focused on, not your cost of living, not the war in Iran. They are focused every day on enriching the Trump family and their friends. Every 2 or 3 days, there's a new story of how they are making themselves rich, and it is just the entire method of operation inside the White House. Yeah, we got a little pushback finally from Republicans a couple weeks ago on this $1.8 billion slush fund for police beaters. But that's been about it. On everything else Trump has done, Republicans have been unwilling to stop it or investigate. Maybe that changes as we get closer to the election. This becomes a bigger issue for them in the polls, but I'm not sure.
I want to read you actually a paragraph from Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan's new book, Regime Change, because it's about this. They say, quote, soon there were so many favors and so much money coursing through the Trump orbit that an unusually large number of administration staff were eyeing exits before the first year had even ended. Many officials looking at how much others were making outside the government were asking themselves, why not me? What do you think the effect of this is?
Well, first of all, it makes those that are inside the White House decide to get rich, and they are. What we know is that people close to the president have been placing bets in the futures markets and the predictions markets to make money off of the war and other announcements that they have inside information about. So first, it just causes people who work for the president to not wait until they get to the private sector.
Yeah.
But it is true that anybody that's close to Trump is making millions of dollars right now. For instance, pardons are being handed out based upon whether you are willing to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to Trump-affiliated lobbyists. And so, sure, there are probably a lot of aides to Trump who want to get to the outside so that they can get paid as part of this pardon racket. It's just corrupt from top to bottom. It's no longer just Trump and his family getting rich. It's literally hundreds of people who work at the White House and are close to people at the White House. And that should just be unacceptable to Democrats and Republicans in this country.
Senator Chris Murphy, I appreciate it. Thank you. Our primary night coverage continues. The Source with Caitlin Collins starts now.
Good evening. I'm Caitlin Collins, and this is CNN's special coverage of election night here in America. As we come on the air tonight, all eyes are on New York, where the polls have just closed in several marquee primary races that pit the progressive movement against the Democratic establishment and what could be a major test of where the party is headed come November. As the results are starting to come in, as we're tracking them closely, we're watching to see if Democratic voters are behind New York Mayor Zohran Mamdani's chosen candidates in these races, as the Democratic Socialist is trying tonight to unseat 2 sitting members of Congress in a remarkable political gamble. That includes the Democratic Congressman Dan Goldman, who right now is fighting off a challenge from the former city comptroller Brad Lander. And Brad Lander is going to join me live in just a moment. We're also closely watching the race to replace the retiring Congressman Jerry Nadler in New York's 12th district. That crowded, star-studded field includes JFK's grandson, Jack Schlossberg, prominent Republican turned Trump critic George Conway, and also 2 rival assembly members in Michael Asher and Alex Borres. The artificial intelligence industry in that race has poured tens of millions of dollars trying to defeat Alex Borres, who has made regulating artificial intelligence a key issue of his career and his campaign. We start tonight, as we do every election night, with John King at the Magic Wall, because, John, obviously the polls now have just closed. New York counts votes quickly, so hopefully we'll have some calls in this hour. What are we seeing so far in New York 12?
At New York 12, we're seeing no results so far. I just want to show you, Caitlin's going, oh, we do have some results now. Look at that, just came in. See that you're right. New York counts quickly. So let's get right to it. Let's go to New York 12th, and you see right here, this everyone expects to be a tight race, and everyone also expects maybe the famous names won't come out on top. And here you have right now two members of the State Assembly, Michael Lasher and Alex Borres. This is about 40% of the vote. These are early votes that are kicked in right away into the system. So you have to be careful. Sometimes what you see in the early votes and then what you see in the election day votes, it can be different. But just out of the box, with about 40% of the estimate, you have Michael Lasher with 41%, Alex Borres with 33%, as you know very well. Artificial intelligence has been huge in this race, especially the money coming into it. Jack Schlossberg, President Kennedy's grandson, down at just 11%, and George Conway, obviously the Republican lawyer turned Democrat, Trump critic, trying to win this seat at 7.1%, also 6% of the other candidate race. So the two top candidates, as expected, not the celebrity candidates at the beginning of the race anyway. Caitlin, as first results come in, the competition there, you see that early lead, that's about 8 points. You think that's significant at 40%, but again, what you get in the early votes that are reported right away, sometimes as you get election day votes, it can change. So we'll watch it.
And what are we watching in the 10th district?
Right, so this is where it gets interesting. This is one of the races where the mayor is involved here. Brad Lander was a mayoral rival, then turned supporter after Mamdani won the Democratic nomination. And you see the early results here, a big gap. Dan Goldman, the incumbent Democratic congressman, this is one of the places where Mayor Mamdani is trying to make a statement tonight to the Democratic establishment in his city and in his state, and also nationally. Brad Lander out to a big early lead there. The expectation of Democrats I've spoken to, I believe the same for you in New York, is that Lander, because he's so well known in that district and because he does have the mayor's backing, would win this race. We'll watch. It's about a third of the vote counted, but that's what you want out of the box, a big early lead.
All right, John King, we're going to check back in with you throughout the hour. And speaking of that district, right now we have joining us New York House candidate Brad Lander, who is, as we said, trying to unseat the Democratic Congressman Dan Goldman tonight. And thank you, sir, for being here. Obviously a key distinction in your race. As the votes are still coming in, and we're watching them closely, as you obviously are, you're backed by Mayor Mamdani. Dan Goldman is backed by the Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries here in Washington. What do you think the results tonight will tell us about whose endorsement matters more?
Look, I think the votes tonight are going to tell us what voters want to see in the Democratic Party, and I think they want leaders who are going to fight, not just Donald Trump, but the billionaires who are rigging the economy against us, and, that's what I think tonight's election is about.
Well, I asked because Hakeem Jeffries was asked today, what significance he's applying to these races, and he said, and I'm quoting him, "A handful of primaries that go in one direction or the other in a given state or two aren't going to reshape who we are as House Democrats." Do you agree with that sentiment, or do you think it should reshape depending on the results?
I mean, look, I think progressives have been winning across the country. Ana Lilia Mejia, Chris Rabb, Adam Hamawi, Daniel Biss. And those are folks who say, we want to see a Democratic Party that's fighting harder. We shouldn't be taking corporate PAC money from Wall Street and crypto and AI and APAC. We've got to fight harder for working families and have people see us fighting for them. And we have to reset the U.S. relationship with Israel.
And do you believe Democratic leadership is in line with what you just laid out there?
Well, I mean, that's why we have primaries. I think the primaries are showing that that's how Democratic voters feel. And as we get ready to then unify and go win the majority in the fall, it'll be important to take those lessons into real account.
Do you think you're going to win tonight?
I mean, I just saw the early voting numbers go up on the air with you. Obviously, I'm very happy to see those early, and I loved being out on the street today. I mean, I love every election day, but the spirit that's been moving in New York City since the Knicks win has been pretty incredible. So look, I think voters are hungry for change. That's why I ran in this race. The feeling, it felt good out on the streets today, and I'm optimistic about tonight's results.
If you win tonight and Democrats do take back the majority, would you vote for Hakeem Jeffries as House Speaker?
Yes, I'm eager to help elect Hakeem Jeffries as House Speaker and also to make sure that our leadership is accountable to the party, just like voters hold us accountable.
How would you plan to do that?
I mean, that's what we're doing right now. Yeah, I'm running a primary against corporate incumbent Democrat to say voters want change on a range of issues, on corporate money, on fighting on housing and healthcare, and yes, on not sending any more money for Netanyahu's wars.
I want to ask you about Israel, but on just what we're learning tonight about your party. When he was asked about the Democratic primaries in New York tonight, including yours, Senator John Fetterman, obviously a Democrat from Pennsylvania, said, quote, "The dirtbag left is surging." What's your response to that?
I mean, look, I'm not going to respond to, to what slurs, I guess. I don't know what you would call it. When I launched this race, I said I didn't think what was at stake was progressives versus moderates. There are plenty of moderate districts across the country, and I've knocked doors for moderate Democrats, and I'll do it again as we head for November. The line is between fighters and folders. And it's possible to be a progressive or a frontline Democrat and say, we have got to be the party that fights harder for working families and actually delivers for them. And on those things, on universal child care, on making housing more affordable for people, on winning back the health care subsidies that Republicans cut, there's broad agreement across the party. The question is, how do we get out there and show people we're fighting for it?
So when Fetterman calls your wing of the party the dirtbag left, I mean, you're saying he's wrong.
I mean, I'm not sure Fetterman is in our party anymore, to be honest. Democrats are having primaries to determine what kind of candidates we want to put on the field. And there'll be a diverse array of candidates because they reflect and represent a diverse array of districts. Primaries are a time to have those fights out. And then as we head toward the fall, it's a time of unity. I will try to be a force of unity. I hope Senator Fetterman will stop attacking other Democrats and decide to rejoin the fold. But if he wants to leave the party, we've got a lot of great fighters who can show up and fight for working families.
You mentioned Israel, which has obviously been a huge flashpoint in this race with you and Dan Goldman. And when he was on the show in May, I asked him how he would describe the difference in the two of you on your views on Israel. And essentially he argued, quote, "We're both Zionists. We both support Israel. We both support a two-state solution. We're both supported by J Street." And then he was arguing that what people are talking about on the streets of New York were not, Israel 6,000 miles away, but what was happening at the White House. How would you articulate your difference with Dan Goldman?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Dan Goldman knows that he's out of step with his district on this issue. He voted for every single standalone aid package to Israel to fund all the 2,000-pound bombs that, destroyed all of the schools and hospitals in Gaza. I've made clear I'll sign on to the Block the Bombs Act and the Ceasefire Compliance Act, neither of which he has, and I won't vote for any more money for Israel while it's violating Palestinian human rights and international law. That's a pretty stark difference, and it's one that Democratic voters are really clear about.
Do you believe what happened to him in the coffee shop where he was with his daughter, and they came out and posted this Brooklyn coffee shop after that he was banned, and they were refunding him because of the money, because they didn't want to take AIPAC money? Do you believe that was a wrong way for that coffee shop to express their views?
I do. I thought Representative Goldman's response was gracious, explaining that he had come in because his daughter needed to use the bathroom, and he bought a coffee, in order to, say thank you and to tip her. I was glad they took the post down. There are a lot of ways that voters can express their passionate disagreements with their representatives. I think there are a lot of voters in the district who don't want to be complicit in genocide, but we don't need to bring that fight into our coffee shops and the small businesses of our neighborhoods. We don't want to compromise on anyone's humanity, not in Israel and Palestine, and not in Brooklyn or any of the 5 boroughs.
Yeah. Brad Lander, we came on the air just a couple of minutes ago as the numbers were still coming in your race. I'm going to do something a little unusual here, so I want you to bear with me. Not many candidates are on CNN when they hear this music. But we do have breaking news, and we can now project that Brad Lander will defeat the incumbent Congressman Dan Goldman in the Democratic primary for New York's 10th congressional district. And sir, obviously, since we have you here live on air as we are making this call, what is your first reaction to this?
Well, thank you. First of all, obviously, I'm thrilled. I did not expect to be on air when the race was called. Look, I love Election Day. I like that voters get to go out and cast their ballots and say, here's who we want to represent us. These are the fights that matter to us. And all I can say is I promise to go out every single day and fight for my constituents and the values that they have, because we need a country that stands up for working people. It doesn't make it so hard to live here. I'll be fighting for a city everyone can afford and where everyone is welcome. And I'm really honored to be on your show tonight.
Depending on how the rest of these races go tonight, everyone's going to be looking for through lines and what this means for the Democratic Party come November. We know at least one candidate who is endorsed by Mayor Mamdani and not endorsed, obviously, by the minority leader here in Washington, Hakeem Jeffries, has won, which is you. What do you think it says about the Democratic Party tonight?
Look, I think it says people want fighters. They want people who reject corporate PAC money from private equity, Wall Street, and crypto and APAC. It wants people who center that real felt needs of working families and go out and fight and deliver for them, like I've been doing for 30 years, protecting tenants and building affordable housing. And I do think it says Democratic voters want to reset the U.S. relationship with Israel. They don't want a foreign policy that compromises on anyone's humanity.
Do you think that's become a litmus test in your party to a degree?
Well, I don't know that it's a litmus test. There's still a majority of Democratic members of Congress who take money from AIPAC, and a majority of Democrats, in the House at least, have continued to vote for military aid. I think it says Democratic voters want to see that change.
Do you agree with how Mayor Mamdani described AIPAC when he was out on the campaign trail?
Look, voters have a lot of concerns with AIPAC and the way, but it's, that's true of other super PACs as well that spend money in dark ways, that don't even talk clearly about the issues that they're focused on. It was an important part of my campaign. At the same time, I'm a proud Jewish New Yorker. Anti-Semitism is surging. It is important for us to be clear that the Democratic Party is not going to compromise on anyone's human rights, not Palestinians in Gaza, and not Jews in New York City or the United States of America. That's not two separate jobs. That's the same job.
Brad Lander, thank you for joining us tonight, and thank you for being with us as CNN projected your race. That was not planned, but you know what? News happens as it happens.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. Great to be with you. Happy Election Day.
Yeah, we look forward to talking to you again soon. My top political sources are here joining me tonight, including Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna of California, Republican strategist Shermichael Singleton, and former Obama administration official Van Jones. And Van, I just want to start with you in terms of what you're watching tonight, now that we know that Brad Lander is projected to defeat the incumbent in this race, two-term Congressman Dan Goldman, who obviously everyone will remember from leading Trump's impeachment when he was working and then obviously becoming a congressman. What are you making of this tonight?
The revolution is being televised. That's what I make of it. The Mamdani phenomenon is not a one-guy thing. The Democratic Socialists are an insurgency in this party. We'll see what happens in New York 13. But I think people who thought this was going to be, a kind of a cute guy off to the side, there's a huge infrastructure here. There's a movement here. There's passion here. And people who don't like it are going to have to wake up and smell the coffee. This is a serious movement inside the Democratic Party. The left is on the march.
Congressman, obviously, you're the Democrat here at the table, the Democratic official with us. I mean, when you're looking at this, how are you watching this tonight?
I'm glad that Brad Lander won. I had done some support for him. And look, this is fundamentally about Gaza. Anyone who says that Mamdani was just about affordability doesn't understand that election. It was partly about Gaza. Young people saw on their phones for 2 years the genocide that took place. And for many people, it's a test of character. Are you going to deny that genocide, or are you going to say what took place and you're going to stand for human rights? That was the central difference in this race between Dan Goldman and Brad Lander. And Brad Lander won. And in my view, this is going to be a central divide heading into 2026 and 2028.
Yeah, look, I think this is the Tea Party moment for my friends on the left. And many in the establishment wing of my party, they dismissed many of the Tea Party elements, and obviously that spurred the rise of President Trump and him being elected twice. I think that's where this is going on the other side, and I agree with you, Congressman. I think in 2028, it will be a tale of two cities. You'll have your establishment, traditional Democrats, against someone who may be progressive, maybe even a Democratic socialist, making their appeals to younger voters in particular, maybe even middle-aged Democratic voters who find themselves to be completely disgusted by a political system that they believe is no longer working for them. That said, as a conservative, I see this as a real contrast between an element of the Democratic Party that believes the United States should retract on the world stage and be weak and not support our allies. I see a iteration of the Democratic Party that does not believe in capitalism. They do not believe it works. They do believe that there's a significant percent of people in America who have earned too much, and that somehow it is the responsibility of the government to take from them and spread the wealth around to everyone else under the guise of making and improving the lot in life of the majority, those who are struggling. I would clearly view that a different way. It is a message and a contrast that I think conservatives will hopefully draw in November. We'll certainly draw it in 2028. Do you want a prosperous America, or do you want an America with government control that is expansive, with higher taxes, that dictates who can and cannot be successful? I'm willing to bet that most Americans will believe in the Republicans when drawing that contrast.
Well, we will see if that is actually the case. We obviously have a lot more races to watch tonight as we are reading the tea leaves here and seeing what these implications are. New York is not the only state we're watching, because remember how the president endorsed both Republicans in South Carolina for governor? One of them, just one, project that the Attorney General Alan Wilson will win the Republican primary for governor in South Carolina. He just picked up President Trump's endorsement last night after the president also endorsed his Republican opponent in the race. That's the Lieutenant Governor Pamela Yvette. The president also was in Pennsylvania today, in part to campaign for Republican Congressman Ryan McKenzie.
We got to get a certain very talented congressman reelected. You know that. We got to get him. Where are you? Where are you, Mr. Congressman?
My congressional source tonight is Republican Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis of New York. And thank you for joining us here tonight. I mean, obviously the president had endorsed both Republicans in that race. What did you read into that? I mean, it came after some of the other gubernatorial candidates he had endorsed did not do so well.
Sometimes the president just does that. I think he endorses people who are also unopposed. He endorsed me, which I was very happy to have his endorsement despite not having a primary tonight. With this particular, in Pennsylvania we're talking about now.
In South Carolina.
In South Carolina with Wilson. I thought that, look, I think Alan Wilson was actually very popular. I actually did think this was going to happen, because people that I talked to in South Carolina, friends that unfortunately have fled New York for South Carolina, have told me that they felt that he was the more conservative candidate. Also, he's the son of Joe Wilson, who is a very popular congressman in the district, and he also picked up the support of Nancy Mace after she lost the primary. And so I'm not surprised by this at all. And I thought that it was kind of smart of the president to hedge his bets.
In the New York race tonight, now that we're projecting that Brad Lander is going to defeat Dan Goldman in that primary race, what do those results say to you?
Well, I'm not surprised by that one either. And I would actually say that I believe that Brad Lander probably won that on his own, not because he had the endorsement of the mayor. I mean, this is somebody who had citywide office. He was a city controller. He had ran for mayor of the city of New York. So he was established. He had been in the city council prior to that. So he had his established following. I think also what it does tell you, though, somewhat, is that obviously the party in New York City is moving a little bit more to the left, or I'd say maybe a lot more to the left. Look, all the Democrats that are incumbents, they all vote the same way. They still all supported open borders. They voted to not fund certain law enforcement. They voted against the tax cuts for middle-class families. The difference here is you're seeing on Israel. That's a big difference between these left-wing candidates and the incumbents that are up tonight. And I think some of the more radical policies. I mean, one of these candidates, the one running against Adriano Espaillat, I mean, this woman has said she wants to abolish police, prisons, borders. At one point, she even tweeted that she didn't think we should fund our military, that we should defund the military. That is extreme and radical, and I think very dangerous. So we'll see what happens tonight. And
I mean, if these policies to the left are that unpopular, I'm talking of Brad Landers and others. I mean, wouldn't that make it easier for Republicans to win in these districts?
Well, unfortunately, I represent the only competitive district in the city of New York. These are districts where they're D plus 30 or 40. They're very, whoever wins the primary wins the general. I think that's the problem with gerrymandering. It brings us to a whole other discussion. When you have political gerrymandering, this is the election, whether it's the far right or the far left. When you have those districts that are so extreme, whoever emerges from the primaries is there, and you don't get somebody who's more moderate in the middle.
So do you think the president should stop calling for gerrymandering?
I do. I've said that clearly, whether it's Texas, California, New York. New York initiated this fight, by the way, 2022. I've had to fight to protect my lines of my district for every single time I was in a campaign. So 3 times now we've had to go to court.
You know, a lot of the focus tonight is on Democrats, obviously, and what their party looks like. The Republican Party is also quite divided right now, and the president is going to lunch with Senate Republicans tomorrow. He was not invited by the majority leader. He was invited by Senator Rick Scott. But it comes as Republicans are criticizing the president over the Iran agreement, ballroom funding, the Save America Act that he wants passed that Thune says the votes aren't there for. I mean, what do you make of the divide in your own party tonight?
Look, I think we need to focus on the low-hanging fruit that is deliverable for the American people. We showed we could do it. We passed the largest tax cut for middle-class families. We delivered on no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. We refunded tens of millions of seniors so that the Social Security taxes they paid were refunded to them. We expanded the child tax credit. We have done some good things. We did secure the border, and guess what? We did deport the criminals. In New York City alone, just over the last few weeks, murderer, somebody convicted of manslaughter, rape, sex abuse, all were detained by ICE. So we're protecting New Yorkers and Americans as well.
Does that mean you agree with people like John Cornyn who have said it's a distraction for the president to focus on the Save America Act and not on things like that?
Well, I think the Save America Act is a very important piece of legislation. We should have voter ID. 80% of the American people support it, so we should do it. And now, if we can't get the Save America Act passed, then maybe we should just look at a regular voter ID law like some other states, many states have, including Florida and many others. We need some form of identification when you vote. You need it when you buy beer, when you board an airplane, when you rent a car, when you get a pack of cigarettes. I think it's important, and not like the Democrats should actually listen to the American people and see that they want it. So let's deliver it in one way. If we can't do it through the Save America Act with some of the other provisions in there, let's at least maybe do a skinnier piece of legislation that can get the job done.
Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis, thank you for joining us here on set tonight on election night. Also, we're following this story in Washington tonight as we are watching the latest results come in from New York and other states as the president is digging in on that unproven claim that vandals caused the damage at the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool, as his administration has yet to provide any evidence.
Somebody went in with a knife and cut it. They cut it up good, and then they cut a 350-foot slip in the form of lots of little slips, real horrible stuff.
That's what the president argued today. There are not pictures or video from the Interior Department officials or the park police showing someone making a cut in the pool, which is actually something that the president told reporters back in May wasn't even possible.
This will last for at least 50 years, and you'll never have a leak. It's very strong. You couldn't, if you had a knife, I don't want to give anybody ideas. If you had a knife, you can't even cut it. So strong, so powerful. It's like powerful rubber. It is beautiful, sealed.
Well, the New York Times is reporting tonight that the cuts that were found by the National Park Service workers, quote, were not directly related to the American flag blue coating that is now peeling or to the algae that has turned the pool a bright shade of green. And then when the pool was actually drained earlier this month, the workers had discovered holes, cracks, peeling caulking, as President Trump now says it will have to be drained again for more repairs after the July 4th holiday. That announcement was one of 4 posts that we saw from the president about the reflecting pool since about 8 p.m. last night, almost as many as he has posted about Iran. My political sources are back here with me. Van, as someone who worked for a previous president, I wonder what you make of how much oxygen this is taking up for the president.
I just can't get my head around it. I mean, we've got real problems here. We've got, people who can't afford their rent. We've got a war still on the, we're hanging on the edge of a war, gas prices through the roof, and this is what we're worrying about. And look, everything this guy touches turns to poop. He can't get anything right. He came to New York, and we lost the one game. The Knicks lost the game he came to. He tries to fix the pool. The pool's worse than ever. I just don't understand what's going on with this guy, but I wish that his advisors would focus him on things that the American people care about and stop all these vanity projects that are just becoming more and more farcical.
Sure, Michael, we heard from Tom Tillis, the Republican senator, today, his take on what's happening, how the White House is responding. This is what he said.
You're telling me, even if it proves to be true, that damaging a lining in the reflecting pool is something that Puro wants to prosecute to the full extent of the law, if it's proven true, and yet they're releasing people who pled guilty to assaulting a police officer? What freaking parallel universe did I just wake up in?
Well,
look,
would you like to answer that
question? If you
question?
want to beautify the Capitol, sure, go right ahead. But I think Van was hitting
No,
on
we're
something.
talking about getting the D.C. U.S. attorney.
That's a moot point. I wouldn't focus on that. I think I want to go back to what Van said, though. Because
But
I think
why
he
is it
made
a moot point? They said
because
people,
it's ridiculous.
The president's claiming 6 people have been arrested.
It's ridiculous to the reasons that Van just made. There are people who are struggling. I'm a Republican right now. I come on this network every single day and talk about the data and analytics and focus groups and all the numbers that showcase my party is in a pretty precarious predicament right now as it pertains to the House. I want to maintain our majority. I'd like to maintain the majority in the Senate, hell, even increase it if possible. And I think the only way you can accomplish those things are by talking about the issues, the kitchen table issues that everyday Americans are struggling with. They're wondering about their economic conditioning. They're wondering if their kids and grandchildren are going to be better off than they are today. And if Republicans can assure Americans that they will be better off, if we can deliver lowering costs, if we can deliver on the affordability issue, if we can make sure that my generation and Gen Zers can actually afford a house and have a family, then I think you've given people something worth voting for you for. I don't care. I could care less about a reflection pool. That's the best way I could say this on live cable television. I'll leave it at that.
Congressman?
The problem is the American people have seen that the emperor has no clothes. Instead of prosecuting the Epstein class and people who engaged in sexual abuse that the president promised, he's going after vandals at the reflecting pool. Instead of bringing prices down, his central promise to the American people, he gets us into a foreign war that are pushing prices up. Instead of bringing manufacturing jobs back, the whole rationale for his candidacy, he's losing manufacturing jobs because of an irrational economic policy. And he's just not delivered on what he promised the American people. And that's why we're going to have a decisive win in the House of Representatives, and you're going to see us have a very good shot.
I don't know if it's decisive. I don't know about decisive. You guys will probably win, but I'm not certain about decisive.
Everyone stay put. We have a lot more election results coming in tonight from New York and another big projection to make right after a quick break. As CNN can now project that state assembly member Clara Valdez will win the Democratic primary in New York's 7th congressional district, defeating the Brooklyn Borough President Antonio Reynoso. Now, Valdez is a Democratic socialist and is now tonight the second candidate who was backed by the New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani to win. I want to go back to John King at the Magic Wall. John, what are we seeing in the numbers in terms of how close this race was?
It's not close, and I think that is the big story. You had Van Jones talking just a moment ago that Mamdani and the movement are not to be underestimated. The organization, the ability to turn out votes that we saw from Mayor Mamdani in the primary and then the general election in New York, turning out again for the candidates he backed here. A lot of New York Democrats thought this one would be close because Antonio Reynoso is the Brooklyn Borough President, because he had the endorsement of the incumbent Democratic Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez, very popular, very long-standing powerhouse in New York City politics. She's retiring. She backed the borough president, but this is a shellacking. This is a shellacking. We're up to 81% of the vote, 58% for the candidate Claire Valdez, the Democratic Socialist, backed by the mayor. So proof again, number one, that the mayor does have a movement, does have a turnout organization, does have a supremely organized political machine in the state. So that's two, as you mentioned. Already tonight you were talking to Brad Lander on the air when we called that one, backed by Mamdani against the Democratic incumbent. Here, Claire Valdez, backed by Mamdani, against the choice of the Democratic incumbent. One more to count, this one here in the 13th district. Right now, the Mamdani-backed candidate, Caitlin, is leading narrowly, but 1,300 votes over the Democratic incumbent congressman there. So this is the third race for Mamdani. Possibility he gets a sweep tonight in what you just have to call a flex by the new mayor.
Yeah, and obviously it was high risk, high reward. We'll keep watching that district as well. John, let us know if the numbers change there, and we'll come back in with you throughout the hour. Congressman, as we look at this tonight, I mean, Hakeem Jeffries was saying today when he was asked about this that it's a few House races and primaries in one state or another doesn't determine where House Democrats as a whole go. Do you agree with that?
Well, I'm 2 for 2 tonight, so I'm happy. Claire Valdez is a phenomenal candidate. She has a clear moral vision on foreign policy, and she understands that the central challenge is the unfair and lopsided economy, and that we need a new vision for the working class. But I do believe that this shows two things. First, Mamdani is a star. Anyone dismissing him is just naive and out of touch. He is one of the 5 most consequential Democrats in the nation right now, and people should treat him with respect. And the second thing is that the progressive movement is on the ascendancy in the House of Representatives and across the country. And the idea of just saying, oh, this is New York, is just not true. We've been winning in Pennsylvania, in New Jersey, in Michigan, in Maine, and this is really where the energy of the party is.
I mean, Van Jones, as you're looking at this, you can see what the margin is right now with 84% of the vote in terms of where these go. Valdez is someone who is a union organizer, campaigned on affordable housing, talked about abolishing ICE, Medicare for all. When you look at that and how this race has played out, what do you think Democrats not in New York City should be learning from this?
Well, first of all, New York City matters because the two most exciting left-wing candidates are here, AOC and Mamdani, but also this is the stronghold for the establishment, Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries. This is a battle between the establishment and this insurgency, and the roof is collapsing on the Democratic Party establishment tonight. If Mamdani gets a hat trick, 3 out of 3, this is a new era for the Democratic Party, and you can't write off New York City because this is the place where both it's the power center for the establishment and the insurgency, and they're going head-to-head tonight. And right now, this is no longer a movement. This is a movement and a machine at the same time. There's just no way to sugarcoat this. If Mamdani pulls off a hat trick, it is a new era in Democratic Party politics.
Well, and if you're a moderate Democrat who's on the election, who's on the ballot this November, Van, I mean, they're all going to get asked about the positions that we're hearing from these other fellow Democrats.
Well, look, I think, from our frontline Democrats will be able to make their case for themselves. I think they'll be able to do okay. We got a lot of national security Democrats in other parts of the country, but this is a big deal tonight. And I think that look, I don't know what you want me to say here. This is a straight up battle between the establishment and the insurgency, and the establishment is getting its butt kicked tonight in New York City.
I mean, Shermichael, as the Republican who's with us tonight, and as you watch this, when you're looking at this, I mean, the comparisons to the Tea Party movement, and what are you seeing playing out tonight, just from a political perspective?
From a political perspective, I agree with both of my friends here on the other side that this is a consequential moment for their party, and it certainly is one that I wouldn't discount or diminish. I mean, you're right, Congressman. You've seen these Democratic Socialists or progressive Democrats win across the country, in some places that have even surprised me, knowing the history of how certain places have voted in the past. Washington, D.C. being a prime example, large African-American population, typically culturally very conservative and pragmatic, just elected a Democratic Socialist, I believe. And so that's concerning to me as a conservative, but it also tells me that there is an opportunity for conservatives to draw a very clear contrast between the folks on the left. You have one party that believes in freedom, that believes in capital markets, that want to see a rising tide lift all boats. I believe if you want to be an entrepreneur and take a risk, you should be rewarded for said risk, and we're going to support you for it. As opposed to another party that's a socialist that says, hey, if you decide to take a risk as an entrepreneur and you do very well, guess what? The big government's going to come and take most of your wealth away and spread it around to everybody else. And again, as I said earlier, I'm willing to bet most Americans would say, if given a fair opportunity, an opportunity to achieve, an opportunity to excel, to bring my ideas to the forefront for people to buy into it. I want to live in that environment as opposed to one that restricts that type
Michael, if I could just say,
of
look,
ability, like Elon Musk, for example.
No one can lecture me about entrepreneurship. My district in Silicon Valley is responsible for 1/3 of the nation's wealth. But what Democrats believe, and I call myself a progressive capitalist, what we believe is you can't just have a handful of people making billions and trillions of dollars while 80% of Americans don't believe in the American dream, where they can't afford a house,
so how much is
where
too
they
much?
can't afford a living wage, where they can't afford child care. And this president promised to fix that. He promised to help the forgotten
But you know what,
Americans, and he's
Congressman?
abandoned him and
The
given
question-
tax breaks to Elon Musk. That's what he's done.
Those are great talking points
It's not
that I
talking points,
hear
it's the
from many
truth.
folks on the left.
It's the
How
truth.
much is too much money should one earn? Who gets to dictate when you've made too much?
It's not about making too much. It's about not paying your fair
No, no,
tax.
but-
Elon
but
Musk
how
is paying
much
less
too much?
tax than a
He
nurse.
pays more
than a
tax
childcare.
than most people
No,
in the
he's
country.
paying almost
That
no
is
tax
not
on
true.
so many of
That
his
is not
billions
true.
of dollars.
So
He
you
just
want to
doesn't
tax
play-
unrealized gains?
I want to make sure
According
that
to Elizabeth
I
Warren,
want to make sure
suppose,
that
yes.
nurses and teachers and firefighters pay the same tax rate
And
as
guess what? I want
millionaires.
every nurse and firefighter who has a dream to be an entrepreneur to do well.
They
Democrats
need
do
health
not.
care and education
And
for that.
Democrats
This
do
is
not.
what the next 5 months of your life will sound like as we are watching getting closer to the midterm elections. Michael, Congressman Ro Khanna, Van Jones, always excellent to have all of you here. Up next for us, as we see Democrats are laser focused on the primaries tonight and what it means for the party's identity. Does it shape the political landscape and beyond 2026? Senator Cory Booker will join me right after this. Tonight, two of the candidates who were endorsed by Mayor Zohran Mamdani, Brad Lander and Clara Valdez, have both won, according to CNN projections. A third, Daria-Liza Avila-Chevalier, is leading incumbent Congressman Adriano Espaillat in the race for New York's 13th congressional district, which is very close, and we are watching it tonight. Joining me here is Democratic Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey. I think the question after tonight, depending on how this third race goes, and if, as Van Jones put it, Mayor Mamdani gets a sweep, is what does the future of your party look like? Is it more like Mayor Mamdani's backed candidates or the ones who were backed by Hakeem Jeffries?
Well, I think that you're looking at just New York. I'm looking at New York, South Carolina. I'm looking at Western states. What the exciting story, and I bet you it's going to be true in New York too, is the record turnouts of Democrats participating in primaries. We're seeing that relative to the Republicans really overshadow them by how many people are pouring out to the polls. You have an American electorate that is seeing that the Republican Party is bankrupt and that the Democratic Party is where the enthusiasm, the energy, and the excitement is. And I'm glad that we have a party that can really appeal to the full spectrum of American voters.
Well, I mean, in the New York 12 or in the Brad Lander race specifically with Dan Goldsman, I mean, looking at that, AIPAC money was a huge dividing line between the two of them, accepting it or not accepting it. You recently swore it off. I mean, is that part of why? Because of how much of a litmus test it seems to have become in your party?
Well, I actually hope the litmus test is a little broader than that. I didn't swear off just AIPAC money. I said all PAC money, these issue area PAC monies. 10 years ago, I said I'd stop taking corporate PAC money. Now I said I'm taking this issue area PAC money. I want the entire Democratic Party to stand for getting super PACs, getting dark money, getting all this money out. I think that should be what the Democratic Party stands for writ large, no matter who you are.
Whose endorsement do you believe is more powerful right now?
I'm a guy that doesn't put that much stock in endorsement. I think that, unfortunately, the candidates who are running themselves are getting less attention. We have great new leaders all across this country that are rising up. The people that endorse them are, it's nice to have, but they're doing the work. They're knocking on doors. They're putting out bold ideas.
But don't you think Mayor Mamdani's endorsement played a role in
I
these
was a mayor
races?
myself. I did endorsements. I got my machine out working for the candidates I supported. I'm not discounting that at all. What I'm saying is I've been calling for months now for new leadership to start rising up in our party with big, bold ideas that can not just capture Democrats, but independents and Republican moderates. We want to create a party like FDR did that has durable majorities, not just through an election cycle, but really bold parties that can pull everybody in.
Given that, what did you make of your fellow Democratic Senator John Fetterman today when he was asked about these New York primaries? He said the dirtbag left is surging, I believe is how he described it.
Again, for me, if you want to heal a country, you can't be picking fights. I think we need to understand that our party is not homogenous. One of the things that makes the Democratic Party great is it's a big tent party. We need to stay that way. The focus has got to be the November elections, because right now there is no check on Donald Trump's power. The Republican Party, which controls Congress, is bending over, doing this advanced form of yoga to let Donald Trump do whatever he wants. We need to take back the House and the Senate. I think what we're seeing from the enthusiasm factor all across this country, including New York, is that we're ready to do just that.
The Senate did vote today for a war powers resolution, which basically is telling Trump he needs to come to Congress or stop the fighting in Iran. The fact that Republicans crossed over to have that get passed, the White House's response was, this really doesn't matter because it's not enforceable. What do you think it says?
Well, this is the Constitution. Clearly says war powers belong to us, not to him. He's trying to say I have the power to pick a fight, pick a war, Venezuela, Greenland, Cuba, Iran, and we're now saying in a bipartisan way, no, you don't. We have the war powers here. And finally, we're starting to see the Republican Party agree that we're here to defend the Constitution, not just to do what Donald Trump says. It's a big day in the United States Senate, and I hope we continue to flex and get back what we should be having right now to a cruel, chaotic, corrupt president, which is checks and balances, accountability, and oversight. We'll really get that after November when we take back the Congress.
Senator Cory Booker, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate your time. Up next, it is source code time. We'll give you the number at the center of a story in the news, and can you guess the story behind it? Tonight's source code is 122.4. Back in a moment with that answer. The guy just crowned the world's loudest person reached.
My lords, my ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Canberra!
By day, Joseph McGrail Baidup is a professional air conditioner cleaner, and by night, he is an honorary town crier. The Guinness World Records says that the Aussie broke the old record that was set back in 1994, reaching a noise level in the range of a chainsaw or an ambulance siren up close. Of course, we love him, and our good friend Harry Enton might just be a tough match for that. Everyone have a good night. Thanks so much for joining us for the breaking news here. CNN News Night with Abby Phillip starts right now.
On Mamdani's influence is put to the test. Is socialism fever continuing to rise? Plus, the president suggests he interfered in California's elections.
I said, do me a favor, take a look. They're trying to steal that election, too.
And Donald Trump and Iran contradict each other.
They're wrong. They know they're wrong.
As the Senate votes to rebuke this war. And more revelations from a new book on the Trump sequel, including how he brags that he's more powerful than some of history's worst.
Hearing him say it out loud was actually sort of jarring of Hitler, Mao, Stalin.
Live at the table, Lee McGowan, Brad Todd, Neera Tanden, Jason Rantz, and Jamel Hill. Americans with different perspectives aren't talking to each other, but here they do.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Good evening, I'm Abby Phillip in New York. The results are rolling in on a number of key primary races across the country, including right here in New York, where we're watching a slew of high-profile contests that are testing the power of Zohran Mamdani, the mayor of this city. Now, the Democratic Socialist-backed candidates in 3 House primaries, including 2 challengers taking on Democratic incumbents, and tonight's results could be a major indicator of where the party is headed this November. So let's get straight to CNN's chief national correspondent, John King, who's tracking the results live. Now, John, we've projected here at CNN 2 of the races being run by Mamdani's chosen candidates. What can you tell us about what happened in those races?
Abby, in the 2 we've projected so far, it's the margins that tell you about the strength of the progressive movement right now, the strength of Mamdani, the strength of his organizations. Let's start here. This is the first one we called. This is the 10th district. Brad Lander was a mayoral rival back in the early days, then a Mamdani supporter, had his endorsement in this race. And look at this versus a Democratic incumbent member of Congress. Incumbents rarely lose primaries. When they do lose, it's not by margins like that. That tells you, wow. Now Brad Lander has been a citywide official, He has a big following in the area. So he has his own strengths in addition to the progressive strength of the moment and the mayor's endorsement. But that is a thumping of an incumbent. Then you move over here to the 7th district. The incumbent here is retiring, Nydia Velázquez. As you know, she's a powerful force in New York City politics. She had endorsed the Brooklyn borough president over Mamdani's pick, the Democratic Socialist Claire Valdez. Again, look at the margin. Nydia Velázquez has a big organization in her district. She is a powerful force, will remain a powerful voice in city politics, but she was thumped tonight by the mayor's choice there. And then now we're waiting here. This one is the closest one of them tonight. This is the third race where the mayor endorsed in the 13th district. Again, taking a risk, going against not only the Democratic establishment, but a Democratic incumbent and a senior member of the Democratic Party in Washington in Congress. Right now, his candidate, though, has a narrow lead, about 86% of the vote in. So this is the only close one. This is the only close one against a very prominent, very powerful Democratic incumbent there. But so far, the mayor has 2 wins, and his candidate is leading in the third as he tries to make, not just in the city and not just in the state, but he's trying to make a national statement about Democratic Socialists and about progressives and about fight.
And John, as we were just speaking, we've got some breaking news coming in to CNN. Let's go over to New York 12. Let's go over to New York 12 because that's where CNN is now projecting that Micah Lasher will now win that pretty crowded Democratic primary. He defeats Alex Borres, who was just trailing him in that race. Now, John, this was one of those interesting races where you had a Kennedy, you had a strong Trump opponent, you had in Alex Borres someone who's running essentially against big tech, and now you have Michael Lasher winning this race. Talk to us about what we should know.
For all the attention on this race and a ton of money thrown into this primary, you mentioned a lot of it by AI forces in this race. But essentially what you had here, Abby, you're in the city, I'm here in D.C., this was West Side versus East Side more than anything else, more than the celebrity candidates, more than the Kennedy grandson, more than George Conway. This was West Side versus East Side, both members of the state assembly there, and Michael Lasher winning this race 39% to 35%. You see Jack Schlossberg, President Kennedy's grandson, getting only 11%. And you see you have to go all the way down. George Conway running last in this primary with just 6%. So a lot of understandable focus because he switched parties, because he's the ex-husband of Kellyanne Conway, a fierce Trump critic. Obviously, the Kennedy name on the ballot brought celebrity to this race, but this became about 2 very popular local politicians in this central Manhattan district right there, and Lasher now projected to win that state. This is a very, very safe Democratic seat. It's the most wealthy congressional district in New York City. Jerry Nadler, the longtime incumbent, retiring, certainly a blue Democratic seat come November.
And we should note, this race was not one that Mamdani endorsed in.
That's
so
correct.
we're still waiting for the one to see where this narrative goes. And we'll be watching that as the night goes on. John King, thank you very much. We'll be back with you as the night progresses. My panel is here with me. Let's start with the 2 candidates that Zohran Mamdani endorsed. We're still waiting again for the fate of New York 13, which frankly is perhaps one of the more controversial of his endorsements. But if he were to get a clean sweep tonight, that message, what is the message that is being sent to national Democrats as a result of it?
Yeah, I think it's a reckoning. I think it's a wake-up call. I think people are trying to say over and over again that we're tired of how the game has been played. We've tried it your way. We've tried it with your consultants. We've tried it with you reaching across the aisle, and we're tired. And we want people who are looking out for the people, and that's what Mamdani represents. I think we're not going back. I think we have to really understand that this version of predatory capitalism has come to its fruition, and we're kind of all in this monopoly game where that one person has all the money and all the property on the table, and we're like, this isn't fun anymore. We have to try new rules to this game, and this is what we're being offered with the Democratic Socialist Party.
But Neera, do you think that, I mean, what then, right? Like, is democratic socialism really something that is exportable outside of New York? Let me just read this quote from John Fetterman, who's no fan of the socialists. He says to Manu Raju, the dirtbag left is surging. That's what he says is happening tonight in some of these primaries.
Well, I think it's hard to take advice from John Fetterman these days about where the Democratic Party is. I will note he had a lot of left support when he was running and then turned his back on the left pretty quickly when he came into power. I think we should look across the board. There's also another important race in New York 17. It'll be Mike Lawler's seat. That is a seat that is really up for grabs. It's contesting a Republican seat. A woman won. Kate Conley has been declared in some places, and she is a former military leader and has served many times in across the oceans to protect Americans. And I think, she was facing a more progressive candidate, but people there were looking for a more moderate person to go up against a Republican. I think this is a healthy Democratic Party. In urban cores, like in New York City, places where there are a lot of liberal voices, people are hungry for change, and I think they are angry at some establishment figures that have left them down, but also where you need to put up competitive races and competitive candidates. Democratic primary voters are still selecting candidates who can best beat the Republican.
But they're pulling the brand leftward. I mean, the Democratic Party now is the Democratic Socialist Party of America. They're for anti-Semitism. They're for confiscation. They're against capitalism.
Come on, we're
this
for
is what's happening.
anti-Semitism.
This
That's
is what's
obscene.
happening.
That's
This
an
is what's
obscene
happening.
statement.
And you also can look tonight and see somebody else is a big loser. That's Hakeem Jeffries. Hakeem Jeffries is going to lose these races in New York, where Zoran Mandami
He didn't
is
endorse
endorsed.
in these races.
He did endorse. He endorsed Goldman. He endorsed his incumbent members of Congress. If he can't get the Hispanic caucus chairman across the line in a city where he's the leading figure of the political machine, then his stick is very short in the U.S. Capitol. And that's because Hakeem Jeffries himself, as liberal as he is not far left enough for today's Democratic primary voters.
It's not about being far left.
Also, he was fine in his race.
The Democratic Socialist Party of America's critique is that the Democratic Party
Yeah,
is
but the
not
thing
far
is,
left.
You just made a statement about.
You have to realize those words don't scare people anymore. Is that saying socialist and saying
First off, I'll say that, especially with the three that are
but to
moving
be
forward
look, I'm
tonight,
gonna tell you
it
my
does
viewpoint as
scare
somebody who
Jews.
lives in Los Angeles, right?
Okay.
A lot of people, and you know this too. You live in LA. The number one thing they're saying is, why can't we have a Mamdani?
That's what they're saying.
And it's about energy. It's not really about some of the things you guys have named. They look at him doing things. They look at him sort of breaking the mold about and imagining things in a different way. And that's what has been missing from the Democratic Party is imagination. They don't have the imagination.
You don't win Congress in New
Guys,
York or LA. You win
let
in
me just hit
Pennsylvania
pause for
where
a
John
second because
Fetterman.
CNN has a projection. I'm going to go straight to John King over at the Magic Wall.
And that projection, Abby, means that the mayor, Mamdani, does get a sweep of the three races in which he endorsed in Democratic primaries tonight. The Democratic Socialist candidate, Danielisa Avila Chevalier, beating a powerful Democratic, long-standing Democratic incumbent, Adriano Espaillat. A much more narrow race than the other two districts here, but this is, again, this is a mayor making a statement. This is a candidate making a statement. You're having the conversation with your panel about we want new, we want different, and yes, we want more liberal. In this particular case, Espaillat is certainly a Democrat and a progressive, but this is part of the generational divide. We've also seen the Democratic Party. We want new, we want younger, but there's one for the mayor. There's two for the mayor. And there's three tonight. So the conversation is going to be, Abby, number one, how much power does Zoran Mamdani have in New York City politics? Number two, he's also making some enemies tonight, let's be honest. He's been mayor 6 months, and he's gone against two Democratic incumbents and the wishes of the retiring Democratic incumbent in the 3rd district there. But he's making a statement for the city, for the state, and he's also making a statement of where he thinks the Democratic Party should go nationally, both for the next 5 months and into 2028. So as you're discussing with your panel, can you export this? Can you sell what he wants to do in New York City, where his candidates clearly are winning tonight, where he won clearly, convincingly? Can you sell it? Well, he wants to be part of that debate, and tonight he's proving he gets a big role in it.
You know, this is a really important conversation because Zoran Mamdani, thank you, John King, Zoran Mamdani is, he took a big swing, right, as we were just discussing. And you don't take those kinds of swings unless you think you can win, and he did. And this last race that we just called, just 1 second, because I think this is super important. Danielisa Avila Chevalier is one of the more controversial candidates. CNN earlier in the year reported that she had deleted previous Twitter posts expressing views for abolishing police, prisons, borders, seizing private property, nationalizing major industries, calling into question Israel's right to exist. Spoke to a friend of the show, Estet Herndon, in a recent interview, said that all deportations are immoral. So all of that being said, there she is defeating a Democratic incumbent, a powerful member of the Hispanic caucus, who's been there. The chairman. He's been there for a really long time. I mean, you could say that all of this is just controversial. She's a bad candidate, but she's likely to just be the congressperson. And does it not suggest, though, that the voters looked at that and they were like, we don't really care about that. We care about all these other things?
I think that's the problem for the greater Democratic Party in this district, or in these 3 districts. You have the ones who are the furthest to the left, who under no uncertain terms support open borders, do not support any deportation. And even in that podcast interview, I mean, she was given a follow-up of, even if it's a murderer, even if it's a rapist, no, they shouldn't be deported. Republicans are very obviously going to take advantage of this, and it's going to hurt the Democrats nationwide. You could win in New York, you can win in Seattle, you can win in Portland and Los Angeles, but that's where you're going to win. And if we're able to define the Democrats who have tried to run away from this label of being socialist, being open borders, being, pro-crime or anti-Israel, if that's the goal of the Democratic Party to run from that, you're not going to be able to do that
But you forget anymore. One important thing. People are broke. That's the other part you forget, is that the affordability crisis in this country, I think, is a major win for a lot of Democrats. It's like, again, all those little scary terms y'all like to use to try to throw people off and say
she's open borders, right?
And I'm not saying that I agree with that. But there's extreme MAGA candidates too that run on way worse things.
Do you
than
call
this.
them out as well? And you usually use them as
guess what? They still
Democrats
get
for that
elected.
point?
You know why? Because there is core things that still resonate with people, and all the scary terms aren't going to get them off of that. At the end of the day, if people are broke, they do not care.
In far-left districts where Republicans aren't running, like Republicans don't lose anything tonight in these districts, but they are going to be dealing with some of these far-left candidates in, say, Maine. I mean, to come up for Congressman Golden's position, you guys put someone very far to the left, and that's now going to go into the Republican camp. We're going to pick that seat up. When you're going into moderate...
I don't think you will, my friend. I think that's the thing. You guys keep putting out all these scary terms. No, we've heard all this anti-Semitism and we are evil and we're open borders.
If you do not believe in Israel's right to exist, that means you're an anti-Semite.
That's one candidate that you're talking about in the entire country. No, listen, you cannot make it about a scary terms. There are people struggling in this country, and we need representatives that don't just represent the donors and the lobby groups and the billionaires. Mamdani is showing us that you can deliver. It is possible to run and keep your promises. I would love to talk without you talking over me the entire time.
Yeah. That's how
And he's also out there saying that he's going to align himself with the folks that do not believe in Israel's right to exist.
Brad Lander.
But if you want to throw that lob, I'd say find me an extreme MAGA politician that's not bigoted. I would say the same thing.
What about what Jamel is saying? I mean, isn't the story of the last 10 years of politics, especially in this Trump era, that there are, even in the Republican tent, plenty of people to the far right that have been welcomed into the tent. And maybe they're toxic, maybe they're controversial, but they still get elected in their ruby red districts. It just seems like a parallel thing is starting to happen on the Democratic side. And part of what's happening is that Democrats are actually learning from what Republicans did.
I don't think
over
they're
the
learning.
last 10 years.
I don't really think they are learning. I mean, I think if you look back, this happened to us. In 2010 and 2012, you can look at candidates like Sharon Angle and Richard Murdoch and Todd Akin. We left a lot of Senate seats and House seats on the table because we did things that made the most radical people in our party happy. And you guys are celebrating, oh, we're taking our party back. We're finally sending a message. It's a message that swing voters are going to be scared of. Congresswoman Chevalier, Congresswoman-elect Chevalier, I'd like to invite her to come campaign in any of the districts where I'm working with candidates this year. She would be welcome. We might pay her travel expenses. I would like her to be an ambassador of the Democratic Party.
But she's not an ambassador of the Democratic
Sure
Party.
She is. Of course she is. Won tonight. You just said that.
No, she's not.
But I'm sorry, but aren't you celebrating the unity that she's bringing to the base of the Democratic Party? You're saying that she's energizing everyone.
No,
and we're going to point that out.
I think we started this by talking. I think we started this by saying her race was the closest. That Mamdani was the thing that we were celebrating, and Mamdani is showing that politicians can. Again, I'm speaking, and you keep talking over me. I would love to finish
a debate show.
Okay, hold on a second. Just finish your point, and then you can respond.
My point is, we were talking about Mamdani. Mamdani, in 6 months, has shown what the Democrats have not been able to show in years. That you can say you're going to get something done, and then you can get it done. That you can look out for the people, and you can actually deliver for them. That if you don't answer to the billionaire class, and you don't answer to a lobby group, and you don't answer to your donors, then you can actually keep looking out for the people. And that's why when we're talking about John saying, you know, is this Mamdani's idea? This is what a lot of us in the country want. We want politicians that answer to us, that look out for us, that represent us.
Madami said he wants to seize the means of production. He says he wants to
does
fix
not
your...
say he wants to. He's been throwing socialism around since the 40s. It's like a scary word that we're all supposed to be
he said
horrified
that.
by.
That's a quote from him.
Jason, respond to that and also square it with the fact that Trump said all those things about Mamdani, but you know, he's cool with him now. He had him at the White House. They're working together on issues, on housing. I don't know. Trump doesn't seem to be sort of following through on his pledge to use Mamdani against the Democrats. He seems to be wanting to walk hand in hand.
But you don't think that Republicans are going to use this, including Donald Trump, once we get closer to the midterms?
I'm just wondering
I mean,
how
we're
effective
obviously,
that's going to be.
I think it's going to be very effective because these are
effectively clasping hands with Mamdani, and they're walking into the future of
Well,
New
is
York City
Mamdani
together.
clasping hands with Donald Trump? I mean, I think it goes a little bit both ways,
Yeah.
where they're trying to say, we can work together, especially in New York. And New York is a special case, obviously, for the president. But the bigger picture issue for the party is more damaging. You can win these races in New York. You're not going to win them elsewhere. That's
disagree.
You can't say Mamdani is a beacon to show Democrats how to win and then say we can't take the socialism to other places.
Is true, right? You can win them in New York, but these candidates may not be exportable to other parts of the country.
They will pull the
so
brand
you kinda,
left.
Well, I mean, I think those are two separate things.
They will
You're
pull
saying
it
that
left.
everybody gets tainted by it.
Other
There is a
incumbents will be
scenario in
scared.
which Democrats actually run the right candidates in the right places.
Yes,
That,
I mean,
that is
can I
also a
just say,
scenario.
can I just say, this whole issue 2010 and 2012, you're absolutely right. Republicans took very competitive races and they put very extreme candidates in. And I think that is not what's happening in the Democratic Party today. What you saw today is in the most liberal parts of America, they found very liberal candidates. And you know, those people should represent, they should get the representatives they want. But as I pointed out, in competitive districts and states, Democrats were nominating sometimes more moderate candidates. Josh Turek just won in Iowa against a more progressive candidate, a great candidate, more progressive candidate, but people believed he has a better chance of defeating Ashley Hinson. And I think that we also saw that today in New York 17. So, and that's a healthy party.
Not in northern Maine, not Graham Plattner, not in California against David Valadao. We are seeing, and how do we know? Because the House Democrats have been spending money to try to stop these people from winning.
So, okay, this is the setup, right, for the fall in 2028. We'll see what happens in all of those races. Next for us, the president admits that he meddled in California's elections, asking the U.S. attorney to do him a favor. We'll discuss. Plus, more breaking news tonight. The Senate joins the House in voting to halt the Iran war and limit Trump's war powers. So what happens now? This is CNN's special live coverage. Tonight, as we continue to watch the primary elections across the country, President Trump is suggesting that he interfered in California's elections after falsely claiming that the state's voting was rigged against GOP gubernatorial candidate Steve Hilton.
I called up the very powerful, very good U.S. attorney in California, and I said, do me a favor, take a look. They're trying to steal that election, too. About an hour after the call, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Hilton has won. So had I not made that call, Steve Hilton would right now be watching the election from home.
Hilton will face former Health and Human Services Secretary Javier Becerra in November, and Trump has repeatedly accused California of election fraud, despite having zero evidence for it. But this is the first time that he's acknowledged directly asking for an investigation and an intervention in an ongoing election. I mean, there's the Georgia case when he calls up and asks for the missing votes, but what is he doing here? And I don't think anybody should feel comfortable about the president picking up the phone, asking the U.S. attorney to dig into an election that is currently underway with zero evidence of anything going wrong?
Well, Steve Hilton said that he didn't have any evidence of anything going wrong either. The president likes these narratives, but there is one part about his frustration that is legitimate. California takes too long to count the votes, and they do it deliberately. First off, they let you mail your ballot on Election Day, so it can come in a week afterward. Then they let you have weeks to come in and cure your ballot if there's a problem with your signature. It doesn't engender no, it doesn't engender confidence.
Hold on, you're laying out a bunch of legal things in
That's
the
why
state
it
of
takes so
California.
long.
Hold on. You're laying
That's not
you're
wrong.
laying out a bunch of things that are perfectly legal in the state of California. You might find them annoying, fine, but they are legal. Why is the president picking up the phone, calling the U.S. attorney, and basically asking him to make his preferred candidate win?
He's asking to investigate if there's any fraud. And it is not just
And
a
why does
frustration,
he
it's not
think?
an
But why
annoying
does he
thing.
think? Why does Trump think that as a result of that phone call, the magic result was that his candidate won?
I can't tell you why he thinks what he thinks, but I can tell you that most voters, regular Americans, think it's ridiculous that California takes so long to count votes.
Most
and
voters
that it-
don't live in
fast?
LA or don't live in California. They don't have to worry about it. They don't live there.
Fast, or do you want it accurate?
Well,
Do you want it fast?
You can have it
or
fast
do you want
and
it
accurate.
No, you can't.
Sure
Not
you
in a
can.
state with 40 million
Sure,
people.
no, you can.
No, we
No.
have a lot of people, and
Texas
we have.
counts their ballots
That's
much
great.
faster
Texas
with
is
a
a
similar
state that gets to
population.
decide how its election
Yeah.
works.
Are we
and
states' rights or are we
California
not?
is
Well,
a state that gets to allow how its election
Regardless,
works.
it's not
In
illegal.
about
That's
a
not
week-
an illegal thing.
No, but-
It's just
but-
the
but-
rules in California.
It takes a long time to count them to make sure they're all
rules
legal.
that engender
And
a lack
again,
of
you
confidence.
don't live
But
there.
why-
So
can I just ask-
Well,
Is
here's the
there
thing.
bad
Here's the thing.
rules?
We're going to have.
We're fine with it.
Can I just
We're
ask you,
fine. We're both from California.
Why
We're fine.
does it actually engender a lack of confidence? Like Steve Hilton, like every other candidate in California, Republican and Democrat, looks at the election ballots coming in. He won some late ballots too.
Sure.
It doesn't, he does not have a lack of confidence. I just think saying things like it engenders a lack of confidence
Around
creates
the world,
a narrative around
swift
it.
counting with certainty upon the receipt of ballots on election day equates to confidence in the process.
No, it's not.
Yes, it does.
In
It happens everywhere else in the world.
Well,
But
that's also
first
what
off,
the data suggests.
It is the data, yes.
The polling overwhelmingly suggests that the longer it takes for a result, the more questions
But
people have.
it's
Whether or not
not
they're
a
fair
fraud.
questions.
Just a
You were
second.
talking about
hold on,
fraud.
ever done a recount,
just a
you know
second.
that all the problems
This is not
are
a
in mail ballot.
conversation. This is not a conversation about what engenders confidence.
Yeah.
This is a conversation about whether or not there was actually any wrongdoing, any reason for you or the president to say that there was anything that went wrong in this election. Do you have evidence?
I'm not taking that position.
Okay.
I haven't
well,
taken
then
that position.
that's what we're talking about
like
here.
mail-in voting.
We are not talking about vibes, okay? Like the point
Sure we are.
is
The public
that
has a right to be
President Trump
confident in
has
the
claimed election fraud in every election that he has lost. Okay? Why? Not because there was anything wrong with those elections, but because he doesn't like losing. So when the President of the United States, with the biggest bully pulpit in the world, tells all of the people in this country to not trust elections, what do you think doesn't engender confidence? Is it that they're counting the ballots, or is it because the president, with his megaphone, is casting doubt because he doesn't like to lose?
But Abby, you got
two
to
separate
the
processes.
Which
But I
one
think
is
there's
it? No, but which
but
one,
it's-
which
I don't
one
think it's
engenders
black and white like
less
that.
confidence?
I don't think
Is
it's
it-
like that.
Is it the actual way that they count ballots, or is it the president sowing
There's two
doubt?
things. The way they count
lying?
ballots. It is the way it's
absolutely-
Is it-
So you mean
so
to
you're
tell me-
suggesting that it's not the president
Yes,
repeatedly
I am.
lying
So you
about
mean to
elections?
tell me if Steve Hilton was the runaway winner, we wouldn't be having this conversation at all?
This is going to not happen anymore in about a week. The Supreme Court is considering Watson versus Republican National Committee, which is a lawsuit that will stop states from accepting ballots after Election Day. Every state in the country will have to have ballots in the door by the time the polls close. That is the first step toward getting a system we can all trust.
Actually, it's ridiculous that Republicans are championing a state, basically a Supreme Court throwing out state rules on voting.
Here's the thing. Even if that, let's say that happens, that would be a change of the rules. Everyone gets to abide by the rules. Guess what? The rules are what they are today. But I do want to ask you again, do you think that Trump's repeated lies about elections have eroded confidence in elections
I
in this
think
country?
that Trump's suspicions about mail ballot
What about the lies?
reflect
about
the
the lies,
suspicions
Brad?
of the voters.
No, seriously.
I
What,
think they
hold on a
reflect
second.
suspicions of the voters.
I don't think you're
I'm
gonna answer
addressing
that
the root
question.
cause of
But
what
hold
you're
on,
suggesting.
I'm asking
You're
you a
not gonna
question
answer the
because
question.
Trump is not talking about things that he just doesn't like. He is straight up lying about things that happened in elections. In the 2020 election, he lied repeatedly about pretty much everything that he claimed happened in that election. You don't think those lies had any impact?
I am talking about what this segment was here. We showed a bite of the president talking about the California election counting process, causing a lack of confidence.
He's right. So hold on a second.
No.
So Trump again. In
I
this
don't think
California,
he should call the U.S. attorney, but I think he's right that the process.
In this case, Brad, Trump is also lying about what's going on in California. And you don't think that that's a problem?
I didn't hear him cite any evidence of fraud in California. I don't. Steve Hilton
But he
says
lied
there's no
by
evidence.
saying that his call changed the result.
His call didn't change the result.
It didn't.
But you're losing the plot here.
No, you're losing the plot.
The substantive thing that affects this country
because you're trying to defend something that's indefensible. That's why you sound crazy right now.
Actually, what affects the country in November is the fact that the President of the United States lies about elections.
I get Democrats think everything's about Donald Trump.
I don't think
it's about the bad.
This segment was actually about Donald Trump.
You're going to talk about how to fix things in the country.
Let me try this one more time.
Well, a big thing to fix would be him not lying.
In the Republican-controlled state of Georgia, Trump went searching for thousands of votes. Was he lying about what happened to those votes?
I think that ballot was counted by people who I trust to count. I think the Georgia
So was he
result
telling the
legit.
truth or was he lying?
I'm not going to evaluate everything Donald Trump has ever said.
No, you just don't want to call him a liar. That's anything. You just don't want to say what it is.
All right.
We can play this game if you want,
well,
but
no,
the
it
substantive
is not a
question
game.
going
Here's the
forward
thing.
is what do we do about fixing
Brad, here's
confidence
the
in
thing.
elections?
It is not. It is actually
ending mail balloting, ending post-election
It is actually
counting.
not a game. It's not a game. It is actually about what is true and what is false.
Correct.
If
We
the
need to
president
not count
has
ballots after
proof,
Election Day.
But that's
if
not
the
the point.
president has
that's not
proof,
the point.
No, the president is lying is the
fraud,
point.
he would have brought it forward by now. But the truth is that he has lied repeatedly. It has been proven. He has lost every single case when it comes to the election claims that he has made. Those are lies, okay? That is not a game.
Donald Trump's
It's not a game. We're not losing the plot.
We talk about
we are
what is
staying
causing the
on the
American
plot.
public
The plot
to not have
is
confidence.
the plot
and that is the fact that California counts ballots in such a way that people can't
Here's
trust
the plot. In America, people get to cast votes. Those votes get to be counted according to the jurisdictions
They should count them by election
where
day.
they live.
Have their ballots
And if
turned
there
in.
is fraud,
They
that
should show
fraud.
up in person on election day.
If there
and
is
count them
fraud,
election
that
day.
fraud should be proven. And any time that somebody has a claim of fraud, bring the evidence. We'll take a look at it. The courts will take a look at it. But that has never happened.
But we
It has
should have a
never
mechanism
happened.
that has
And
as little
so it has
subjectivity in it as possible.
I'm still waiting for President Trump to bring the evidence of fraud that he claims is in California or anywhere else where he has lost an election. And let's see if it's actually real or if it changes the result. So far, it has not. Next for us, breaking news. In a rare rebuke, the Senate has voted to limit Trump's power in this war against Iran, including removing military forces from Iran. So what happens now? We're going to debate that next. Breaking tonight, both chambers of Congress want to rein in Donald Trump's war powers. In the Senate, 4 Republicans joined all but 1 Democrat to pass a war powers resolution that directs Trump to remove military forces from the war in Iran. The vote is largely symbolic, and it's unclear exactly how it can be enforced, but it comes as Iran denies that the president claims that Tehran has agreed to, quote, the highest level nuclear inspections until infinity. He was asked about their denial, and this is what he said.
The Iranians are saying there's no scheduled visit for the IAEA inspectors. Is that part of your agreement?
They're wrong. They're wrong. They're wrong. They know they're wrong. They told us inside, and we have it down 100% inspections. And if they were right, I'd cancel the meetings right now.
When will those inspectors actually be on the ground?
At the appropriate time. At the appropriate time. There's no rush, but they'll be on the ground at the appropriate time.
I mean, you know, I'm not suggesting that we should take Iranian officials at their word, but I will ask this. When J.D. Vance says, oh, everything's fine because we have a handshake deal with them behind the scenes, how are we supposed to know that anything has actually been accomplished when none of this is written down? The Iranians are denying it. Nothing is actually happening. It seems like if there is a handshake deal, they can't trust that handshake.
Oh, I agree. So there's two separate issues. Number one, anything Iran says should not be trusted. They are a terrorist state. They put out information because they're also talking to their own constituency and the hardliners in Iran. Pushing that aside, yeah, we shouldn't just trust Iran. And we'll know what is part of this deal in 55 days or whatever that number is, because that's when we'll actually get it. I think there's a lot of speculation. The president is clearly taking a stance saying we're not going to have a deal unless this is a part of it. And is this perhaps part of the negotiating to let Iran know, yeah, we're not going to have a deal unless this is agreed to? Maybe. I don't know. But I certainly believe that Iranian officials are talking behind the scenes in a way that's different than they're talking publicly.
I mean, can I just say, since this war started, I've been on the show a few times, and every single time it's like the president says he's not going to sign a deal or come to any agreement unless, you know, this has been achieved or that has been achieved or this has been achieved. I mean, obviously, you could have nuclear inspectors in today, and they don't have them. And we ended military hostilities. The truth is, let's just be honest and candid. We gave away all of our leverage with the seizing of the bombing. It's good to seize the bombing. Shouldn't have started the war in the first place. But we have very little leverage with them. And the president keeps talking and is about different things that he's going to accomplish that we have no reason to believe will actually ever happen. And I think all of this is honestly a PR strategy to manage his defeat, our defeat in this war that he has started and is basically handing over power to the Iranians.
So that's on the IAEA inspections. There's also the missiles. Iran's president says the discussion over our missiles does not exist in the MOU, and it never will. If we did not have the missiles we use for our defense, Israel and the United States would have devastated Iran. He is right that there is no talk of missiles in the MOU. And I don't know, you say don't listen to Iran, but here is Trump back in March of this year, and then here's Trump on June 17th, just recently, as they're working through this MOU. Listen.
Our objectives are clear. First, we're destroying Iran's missile capabilities, and you see that happening on an hourly basis, and their capacity to produce brand new ones, and pretty good ones they make.
Well, what am I going to do? Am I going to let Saudi Arabia have missiles, but they can't have them? Yes, sir. It doesn't work that way, you know? It doesn't work that way. And missiles aren't the problem. Missiles are, they hurt a little location, but they don't blow up the planet.
Maybe they are aligned. Maybe the United States and Iran are aligned that they ought to have missiles after all this.
The president was right on March 2nd. He's wrong now. And the U.S. Senate was wrong today to limit the ability to keep the American military there. It's the one stick that's in the deal. And what is a very bad deal, in my opinion, right now, at least at the MOU stage. The one stick in the deal is that American forces don't have to leave the region until 30 days after the full agreement is completed. And so today the U.S. Senate, and I think a few Republicans made very bad votes here. They took advantage of the fact that Mitch McConnell was in the hospital, Dave McCormick was traveling with the president. That was a mistake on the Senate's part, and the Republicans who voted for them, they were dead wrong today. They should have left the stick in that American forces stay in the region until 30 days after the conclusion of a successful deal.
I think a larger problem with this is that the entire Trump administration is trying to tell people they're tasting caviar when it's a doo-doo sandwich. And we know this about this deal. And there's nothing about it that looks good. But at this point, we've gone so far down the line of something we never should have been in the first place that it's leaving us very few options in terms of how we extract ourselves in a peaceful way. I've said it many times on this show since this has all started. Iran is fighting a different war. And it feels like the Trump administration does not understand this. Americans don't want the war. They're not good with the gas prices. They're not good with casualties. They're not good with a lot of it. Iran, when your enemy is able to take a punch and doesn't mind getting hit, that's a different kind of war. Like, they don't mind suffering. We mind the suffering. They know this. They know midterms are coming up. As you said, we've lost all the leverage.
Well, what's the deal that you're upset about specifically?
It's not that I'm upset with the fact that we're even in this.
And I agree.
Right.
And I'm concerned that this MOU could lead to a bad deal, right? But the
I don't
folks
see
who
how
are
it doesn't.
saying,
Why
well,
do you,
but you're saying that you disagree with the deal. The deal hasn't been
Okay.
set yet. Is
Okay,
all
to your
I'm
point,
saying.
yeah, is that we don't know what the exact
And you and I might
points
be on
are.
the same page at the end of it.
Let her
You're
respond
right.
to you. Go
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Okay, we don't know the exact term, but everything that we're hearing is disturbing. And that is the point, is that, no, I don't trust Iran and the PR campaign they're running. I realize they're running it. The problem is we have a president that lies all the time. So we don't really know who to believe and who to trust, and that's leaving everyone who's an American very unsettled.
We're going to take a quick break, and we'll resume this conversation on the other side of this break. We'll be right back. The Trump administration has spent the last few days trying to defend the amount of sanctions relief in their memorandum of understanding with Iran. But we found this old 2023 J.D. Vance tweet where he is talking about the Iran nuclear deal. And he says, this is facetiously, "We didn't give them money. We just unfroze their money. They promised they'd only spend it on humanitarian supplies. I'm sure they're very trustworthy. I'll ignore the $400 million pallet of cash delivered by the last Democratic administration. Complete idiocy." He's trying to say that the Obama deal was that bad. Why does that sound like an exact description of the very deal that they have now said that they've signed with Iran? Trump said yesterday that they're just going to spend the money on Iranians and they're going to spend it on American goods and farm products.
Yeah, it's just lie after lie after lie. Like, you know, he's telling people that the Strait is open and it's record numbers going through. And I think on Saturday, 20 boats went through, and a normal Saturday would be 130 boats going through. Everything just kind of keeps changing. I think our best case scenario here, after the Obama deal being such a disaster, is getting back to status quo, but with the loss of $80 million, 14 American soldiers, 170 Iranian school children. You know, like, our best case scenario is to get back to where we started, which we were told was such a terrible disaster. And it looks like we're going to end up paying money to this group of people that we have been told since this war started are the worst terrorists in the world.
I mean, I think it's even worse than before, honestly, because the whole thing that should stick in everyone's craw here is the sanctions relief money that they are getting. They had sanctions on them. They couldn't just sell oil on the open market. Now they have sanctions relief. That makes them much stronger in the longer term. And the big
sanctions
difference.
relief is much more significant than any sanctions relief in the JCPOA.
I mean, what's fascinating, it's like by an order 10, 20, 30. This is the big difference is this is so much bigger sanctions relief, in which is basically funding the Iranian National Guard. So, I mean, I just think what's surprising to me is we all know that that's going to happen. That is happening, and yet there's so little criticism. There's some Republicans criticizing, but I'm surprised others here aren't.
I mean, this is, by the way,
This
is the sanctions relief that's not dependent on there being a final deal. This is what happens today.
Yes, now.
And then at the same time, the president is asking the American people for $80 billion to fund the war thus far. And Senate Republicans, seeing how the war has impacted farmers, according to Politico, they want $17 billion to assist farmers. The White House wants to negotiate them down to $10 billion. So this is like massively expensive for the American people. And Iran is just getting rich right now. They don't even have to make a deal.
Well, they're not getting rich right now. I mean, to be clear, the economic problems that they've dealt with is very serious.
And are we not helping them get over it?
If the money is
even over the next 60 days, they are pocketing billions of dollars every day.
The vice president has pointed out, and the president as well, that this is going to be based on metrics and performance. Don't know what that looks like
Not
yet.
the current sanctions. Don't know what that means.
All of this
Jason, the reason I'm interrupting you is because what I'm talking about is right now.
Yes.
This is not metrics based, okay? This is, they sign on the dotted line and they get sanctions relief that pretty much exceeds anything the United States has ever granted Iran over the last 40 years, right now.
100%, which is why I'm saying, and Republicans have been pretty clear on this, that we're against that kind of sanctions relief. I'm also suggesting, however, that they're not getting rich off of this. I don't think that that's a fair assessment because of all the economic damages that they've sustained during this war. just shutting down the Strait of Hormuz, which is open, by the way, and lots of ships are going through. Not the case early on, but that has not been the case today
Yeah,
and over the
20
last
ships
few
went
days.
through on Saturday.
Yeah, Saturday, but many more have come through over the last couple days.
Your point.
But my point is that they're not just getting a check as if they're starting from zero.
And they
for
have no
300 million.
centrifuges either. That's the thing that's different.
Yeah, 100%. So the
guys, we
context
got
behind
rolled.
this is
We
didn't get
rolled
rolled. I
in
think
this
there's some
war.
people who
Art
wanted
of
us
the
to
deal
get
got rolled. You
but we
sent the
didn't.
wrong people to new negotiations, and we lost.
We gotta go. Next for us, more on our breaking news. All of Zohran Mamdani's candidates win their primaries in a clean sweep in New York. What does this signal about the Democratic Party's future? Is it taking a hard left turn? Our special coverage continues right after this.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Laura Coates, and it is a busy primary night in America with a big message from Zohran Mamdani to the rest of the Democratic Party. The New York City mayor put his name behind 3 House candidates, and we can now project all 3 will win. That's a clean sweep. We can start here. Mamdani backed Brad Lander. He will beat incumbent Congressman Dan Goldman in New York's 10th congressional district. The race was called while Lander was being interviewed live on CNN.
I think it says people want fighters. They want people who reject corporate PAC money from private equity, Wall Street, and crypto and APAC. It wants people who center that real felt needs of working families. And I do think it says Democratic voters want to reset the U.S. relationship with Israel. They don't want a foreign policy that compromises on anyone's humanity.
Now, in the second race, a Democratic socialist endorsed by Mamdani, Claire Valdez, will defeat Brooklyn Borough President Antonio Reynoso in New York's 7th district. It was an open seat, but the retiring congresswoman, had backed Reynoso. And to complete the hat trick, Daria Liza Avila Chevalier will defeat 5-term incumbent Congressman Adriano Espaillat. She's another Democratic socialist backed by Mamdani. Espaillat is one of New York's most prominent Latino Democrats and the chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. Joining me tonight, Karine Hajar, Washington Post editorial board member and a fellow at the Steamboat Institute, Democratic strategist Sawyer Hackett, CNN political analyst and former Biden White House communications director Kate Bedingfield, and Tiffany Smiley, founder of Endeavor PAC and a former Republican Senate candidate in Washington. What a night. I want to talk about all of it. Let's begin with you, Kate, because, I mean, this is a sweep of candidates that Mamdani endorsed, and 2 actually took out incumbents. What is that telling you about the state of play for Democrats with an eye towards midterms?
Yeah, well, like Mamdani is certainly in his honeymoon period. You have to give him credit. I certainly give him credit for a very effective start to his mayorship. He's really has energized voters, and clearly, as they were looking toward their votes tonight, they were looking at who he was pointing to. So I think no question, this is a statement of his strength in New York City. Certainly also a continued expression of the sense that people are tired of the status quo, and I think you've seen that certainly in other races. Now, it hasn't necessarily materialized in other races in the form of Democratic socialist candidates winning, but you've certainly seen voters say that they're frustrated with the status quo, that they want to see change, and I think Mamdani backing these candidates who prevailed tonight indicates that. Now, the thing I will say, though, is it's important also not to forget New York City, of course, one of the most liberal jurisdictions in the entire country. If you look out at places like New Jersey and Virginia in 2025, where you had candidates also delivering a very effective anti-status quo message, but doing it from kind of a much more moderate lane, and those candidates triumphed. So I think I would caution a little bit reading too much beyond the borders of New York City, because it is a uniquely liberal place in this country.
I mean, is it instructive, though? I mean, obviously, Mamdani, I look at him as a very interesting person in the sense that Republicans were eager to run against him. They wanted a democratic socialism message. They thought it would be very detrimental for his success as a candidate, let alone as an incumbent. And then you have the President of the United States, who didn't badmouth them, seems to get along with them, and now he is at least a progressive kingmaker of sorts. If you're a Republican strategist thinking about this and wondering how you gauge this, is it instructive to you? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fascinating. I've been saying for a long time who is the leader of the Democrat Party.
perhaps it's Mamdani. He's clearly looks like the kingmaker in this, and it's moving forward. You know, a lot of these candidates are also playing to people's emotions. They're talking about policies that I don't believe they will be able to deliver on. Not only that, they talk about no deportations under, like, you can be an illegal criminal murderer, no deportations. But that's not just.
Well, they didn't say that extreme. They did talk about there were boundaries to it, right? But
that's pretty extreme. And when you look at it, though, that's not just to these socialist candidates. Tellerico in Texas says he wants to put a welcome mat at the border. Plattner wants to abolish ICE and law enforcement as well. So
And a lock on
perhaps,
the door, though.
perhaps this is the new Democrat Party.
But what did you say? Hold on.
And a lock on the door. That's the full quote from Tallarico. It was not just a welcome mat. It was and a lock on the door. It was the finish. So the end of that quote was that we're going to put a lock on the door and a welcome mat on the front.
And the importance of that is the boundaries in which this is being talked about in terms of there are limitations to the policies that are being talked about by Republicans.
Right, and as Kate was alluding to, I mean, this is New York. This is a bastion of liberal, progressive politics. And of course, Mayor Mamdani, who's riding this kind of tsunami of popularity right now, is going to be able to play kingmaker. And what I like about what he's doing is that he's spending that political capital that he's earning. He's not banking it for his own kind of political aspirations. He's out there saying, I want to help shape the future of the Democratic Party, at least in New York City, at a time when I think a lot of rank-and-file Democratic voters are looking for a new direction for the party.
Van Jones, I want to hear your point, too, on this. Van Jones, our colleague, had a pretty tough assessment of this night for establishment Democrats, your larger point. Listen to this.
This is a battle between the establishment and this insurgency, and the roof is collapsing on the Democratic Party establishment tonight.
So when you hear that and think about, obviously, the rejection and again, New York City is not every city in this country, although, again, judging by all the number of Knicks fans, apparently it was everywhere, all over the country. But let's talk about election night there for those who could vote there. I mean, you've got this sort of damning assessment of what it's like to be an incumbent and the rejection. So what did Democrats do looking forward, or actually any party in incumbent status?
Well, let's be honest, the roof has been collapsing on the Democratic establishment. They need a new vision. They don't have a vision. And so you have more radical candidates come in and fill it and, have their own ideology fill it in. And I think you guys have made excellent points about, like, this isn't just New York, a very blue state. This is New York City we're talking about for a lot of these races. And Mamdani has proven very popular. And so I'm not surprised that the candidates that he has backed have been successful. What I will say is, I think the more interesting trend out of this is that you're having candidates elevated over incumbents who have been very hard on the Trump administration. And I think that should be a signal to the establishment that just hammering home on Trump is not enough. They are now looking at corporations, the oligarchy. Israel is a big one, too. Instead of, frankly, I think, looking at the tremendous problems that their own state and city has. But that seems to be working because voters are really frustrated right now. So both the Democratic establishment, but also Republicans should be taking note.
I mean, again, it's not just New York City, although we are focusing on that. So you've got, Katie Wilson, a Democratic Socialist mayor in Seattle. You've got L.A. and D.C. could elect Democratic Socialists in November as well. I mean, this idea that it's just confined to that one area might not be the accurate trend. And you have to wonder, of course, if you look at this in the future, every so-called establishment rejection, if you elect somebody, they become an incumbent and therefore a part of the establishment one day. I mean, Trump himself ran as an outsider. I don't know how much insider you can get than a two-term president.
Very much so, very much so. And a lot of what we're seeing here is a reaction to Trump. And you were talking about some of these things that some of these Democratic Socialist candidates are saying that would frankly not be palatable in a lot of parts of the country. But the kind of through line is they are fundamentally reactions to what have become unpopular Trump policies on immigration, on interior enforcement, people seeing their neighbors pulled out of schools and sent into deportation processes, and people have said that no, enough, too much. And so what is interesting, I absolutely agree that broadly speaking, of course, the Democratic Party has to set its vision, has to tell people what it stands for, especially as we move into 2028. But the cold reality of midterms is they are historically a referendum on the party in power. They are a referendum on the White House. People are frustrated with the cost of living. They blame Donald Trump for it. And so I think Democratic candidates who could just hammer that message into November, I think are going to do well. In the midterms.
I would push back, though, because I think you know, I agree this is a referendum on the party. You have a group, the DSA in particular, that is offering a message, and then you have the establishment that is just not offering a message. But we're talking, again, about deep blue New York, and even if you're looking at D.C., Seattle, these are all places that are probably going to go Democrat anyways. What Democrats need right now are the purple districts. They need the places that Republicans are just barely holding on to, and I don't think that the message that Mamdani is running on and endorsing in these races is the one that can win the seats that Democrats actually need.
Well, you know, Tiffany mentioned, and she alluded to the fact that she thought maybe Mamdani was the leader of the Democratic Party. I think many would bristle at that conclusion, but there is a concern when we're talking. We had a CNN poll that came out just last week about so many independent voters ruling the day and strategists having to recalibrate as a result. Do you think that the messaging of places like New York is moving the Democratic Party too far left to be able to survive in a general, or is that hyperbole?
It may be pushing the Democratic Party to be a little bit more bold in its policy approaches, but I think, you know, I agree that this was also a reaction to the weakness of the Democratic Party brand right now. I mean, that is in large part due to the kind of eyes wide shut leadership of the last 4 years and kind of ignoring the problems that we had with our own voters. And that weakness has left an opening for very progressive candidates, for even Democratic Socialist candidates, to go out there with a kind of new vision for the party that I think voters are saying, you know, we're so fed up with Trump, we're so angry about the current situation that we're willing to embrace a different, you know, kind of bolder approach that may not even necessarily, you know, own the moniker of the Democratic Party. They'll call themselves Democratic Socialists, and I don't think independent voters are necessarily scared of that anymore. I don't think the right wing has demonized that to the point where it's you know, that we can't retrieve those voters back to our coalition.
I think the candidates are doing it for themselves, though, because a lot of these, you know, what I find interesting about these New York races is they're anti-Israel. A lot of these candidates are anti-Israel. They want to abolish the police. They want Medicare for all, transgender reassignment for all. And these are some of the most Jewish communities in the world.
That should tell you the state of our relationship with Israel.
Besides Israel. And so
on that point,
and
you know,
not only that,
hold on, I want to finish that point, but I did talk to Dan Goldman last night, who just lost in his race. And we know that Israel and the policies that Netanyahu has promoted has been quite an undercurrent of tension for a lot of voters in that particular area. He lost to Landers 66% to 33%. This is somebody who was a DOJ or pursued justice darling not more than a year ago. Waiting to hear from him still tonight about his loss. But here's what he told me just last night about the prospect of losing this race. Do you think that your views on Israel or your stance with respect to the definition of genocide will ultimately cost you this election?
I have no idea. And if I lose because of that, then so be it. I'll wake up on Wednesday morning and I will proudly look myself in the mirror and know that I stood with my values and my morals and that I still have my integrity, and that's much more important to me.
So do you think that AIPAC stances on Israel, is this a new litmus test for Democratic voters going forward?
It shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be, but it
shouldn't be.
I mean, these candidates also, in some regard, hate America, and I think that is
Which candidate hates America?
Chevrolet said
hates America.
She said the USA is a disgrace, and I want to wipe my hands with the American flag.
James Baldwin said, "Hold on, I love this country more than anyone else and any other." I'll finish James Baldwin's quote. I love this country more than anyone else, which is why I reserve the right to criticize it perpetually. People have every right in this country to redress grievances.
But that should trouble every single American, because this is the greatest country on earth, and it is great because we do not have socialism. Unless you want to go back to the Soviet Union, if everyone would like, if the Democrat Party wants to go that way, here we go. We have an open
It's going to be a litmus test on the right just as much as it's on the left. I mean, Israel, it's the same with AIPAC, right? Like, their actions have necessitated a conversation about their relationship with the Democratic Party. And I think a lot of Democrats are looking at that relationship with weary eyes, because we've seen, especially over the last few years, that Israel has carried out atrocities with our blessing, with our tax dollars, and just with Iran have pushed President Trump, well, you know, his choice ultimately, into another, you know, ridiculous war in the Middle East that's cost American lives, that's cost billions of dollars. And that's in large part due to the actions of Benjamin Netanyahu. And I think that that necessitates a reevaluation of our relationship with Israel and our relationship with AIPAC.
Can I just say, I think that Iran has invited a lot of the problems. It is literally a tyrannical, fanatic regime.
Sure.
They've invited a lot of their own problems. But look, let's zoom in. We're talking about New York a lot tonight. New York has plenty of problems. The fact that Israel is a litmus test when New York has some of the least competitive tax structure, a lot of businesses are thinking of leaving, cost of living is through the roof, working people are really struggling, and Israel has become a litmus test in this election is ridiculous. Socialist candidates are using that as a distraction because they know that their ideas simply don't work.
Well, they don't believe that, though. They will be steadfast, and they will talk about their viewpoints and stance, and I'll let them speak for themselves. I'm not going to speak for any candidate. I'm not running. But they have said more than once that they believe that their stance is about foreign policy proposals and the priorities of the American government and military, and to whom they owe allegiance or allyship. And so they don't look at it as the idea of either anti-America. They look at it as they have expressed responsibility of expressing their viewpoints through American lenses. So is it for them so dismissed?
Look, I think ultimately it's up to the voters. If that's a voter's top issue, that's a voter's top issue. Our country is great because we have that choice. I just think that when you're looking at the problems that not only the country faces, the economy, immigration, crime, all of these different issues, but then you look at New York and it's all times 10, it's pretty interesting that people who carry an ideology that we know doesn't work anywhere else, it has caused suffering and death for many people, are spending so much time on that hot button issue.
I cut you off. Go ahead.
No, I mean, look, where it is dangerous, unacceptable, contemptible is the conflation of criticism of the actions of the Netanyahu government with anti-Semitism or criticism of the Jewish people. And I think there are absolutely candidates running, including DSA candidates, who have a vehement disagreement with the way the United States has funded Israel's defense. They can and should make those arguments. Where it gets really, really scary, and where I think it has started to bleed into this territory, is when it becomes a criticism of the Jewish people or suggestion that somehow Jewish money is, pulling strings in our government. I mean, these are age-old anti-Semitic tropes. And you hear it from candidates on the far left. You hear it from candidates on the right, too. The right is having this debate as well. And that is where it gets dangerous. And I think the idea that it's a litmus test in races across the country, I'm not sure I agree with that. I think most voters across the country may feel some sense of moral outrage when they look at what has happened in Gaza. Most Americans are not voting on that issue.
I encourage everyone to go to my Twitter page because I interviewed Goldman about the idea of conflation as well. And he had a very interesting response that I think everyone needs to hear. But stand by. This panel's with me for the full hour, and they're taking your questions a little later on. Hey, you can join the conversation. Just text me, 818-972-7272. Include your first name, your city, your state. I like to know who I'm talking to. Up next, we'll hear from a top ally of Mayor Zohran Mamdani, former Congressman Jamal Bowman, standing by to weigh in on tonight's races and what it could mean for his other friend, AOC. Plus, he called himself Big AI's #1 enemy, but he fell short in his race to take him on. Why his defeat could set the tone for AI in American politics. That's next.
The AI companies said they wanted to make an example out of me, which is an insane thing to say out loud. That's definitely something you keep inside your head.
Party. The future is setting up as a battle between insurgents and incumbents. My next guest was an insurgent who won his congressional race just north of New York City as an outsider. Then he lost as an incumbent during a fierce primary against a centrist Democrat. With me now, former New York Democratic Congressman Jamal Bowman. It's good to see you, Congressman. I want to hear your take on tonight because you're a supporter of the New York City Mayor, Zohran Mamdani. He just pulled off a clean sweep of the 3 congressional races he endorsed. What do you think message that sends to the establishment wing of the party tonight?
It's a very exciting night in New York City. The mayor has been pounding the pavement, knocking doors, running ads, doing everything he needed to do to support the candidates that he endorsed. But it wasn't just the mayor. It was the New York City Democratic Socialists of America. It was Make the Road Action, New York Communities for Change, so many grassroots organizations that surrounded these candidates with the support they needed from the very beginning. And we had great candidates from the very beginning. Claire Valdez, Daria Liza, Brad Lander are all exceptional candidates and organizers who have been doing the work on the ground when no one was looking. And so when you combine great candidates with grassroots organizations like DSA, with a mayor who's hands-on and pounding the pavement, this is what you get. You get incredible results like tonight that we hope can unlock the political imagination for the entire country in terms of fighting for working class values and people.
Let's go there, because there are those who are going to easily try to swap this away and say, yeah, it was a sweep, but that's New York. That's just New York. What can other states and cities, and Democrats in particular who don't live in places like New York, take away from this election?
Listen, everyone cares about affordability. Everyone cares about a bloated military budget where we have billions of dollars per day going towards war with Iran, while we cannot afford to pay our utility bills or our child care bills or our housing. And so affordability remains a huge issue, and where our dollars go remain a huge issue across the country. And when we talk about the economy, it's not just about what's happening at the stock market level. It's about what's happening day to day in the homes of Americans and how much money people have in their pockets. And so those working class values of fighting for the working class, fighting for small businesses, that's what the country is supposed to be about, not the big money that has corrupted our politics for so long.
You know, President Trump talked about the elections today. He thinks the results will make it easier for Republicans to take it in November. Listen to what he said.
If you look at New York, we have all communists running. They're all excited. They're going to win their primaries, but I can't imagine they can beat a normal Republican. So I think it's a good thing, Musa. What do you think? I think it's a good thing. Wouldn't you like to run against somebody like that?
One, they're not communists, but will nominating these Democratic socialists, will that hurt Democrats across the country? Do you think Trump is on to anything?
No, I don't think it's going to hurt people across the country. First of all, you know, every district is different, every community is different, and you have to run based on the needs of your community. But again, I go back to what I said earlier: affordability, dignity, opportunity, education, healthcare, housing. You know, all of these issues are universal issues. And so it's not about a label. You know, the fear mongering isn't going to work anymore. The division isn't going to work anymore. And unfortunately, it's coming from Trump, but it also was coming from some of the Democratic, you know, incumbents in these races as well. It's not going to work anymore. We want solidarity. We want coalitions fighting for working class people and values. And I think that works anywhere across the country. We see it in New Jersey. I think we're going to see it in Colorado next week with Malat Kairos when she wins her election as well.
You are correct. There's not been universal endorsement of these candidates across the so-called establishment of the Democratic Party. And many eyes have been on Mamdani and, of course, his endorsements. But Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she's used her political capital to endorse many Democratic socialists in state races, and she easily won her primary tonight. Do you think that this momentum that we're seeing is going to add fuel to people who think she could very well be a viable 2028 candidate?
Well, yes, she is a viable 2028 candidate, you know, if she chooses to go that route. I mean, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez has been an incredible leader, not just for progressives and socialists, but for the country since she's gotten into office. And so people are excited about her and by her wherever she goes. So, yes, they're excited to see her, you know, potentially take that run in 2028. And if she chooses to take that run, I'm excited about that run and excited to support her in that run. But hopefully she's going to be a leader in our country, regardless of what office she sits in for a very long time, God willing. And so, yes, the fuel will continue to be added. But again, political imagination. That's what AOC represents. That's what Zoran represents. That's what Claire, Daria Liza, Brad, Jamal Bowman, Cori Bush. Political imagination. What's new? What's possible? Not the old establishment that has so many people hurting right now.
Jamal Bowman, excuse me. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Up next, the primary result that may shape the debate over artificial intelligence and how much voters actually care about this issue that everyone seems to be talking about. Plus, new trouble for Trump's handling of Iran as Republicans in the Senate do something incredibly rare: vote against the president's war. Well, we're tracking a race that could have huge implications in the battle to regulate AI. Tonight, CNN is projecting New York Assemblyman Michael Lasher will win the Democratic primary in New York's 12th district. It's a seat currently held by the outgoing Congressman Jerry Nadler. But he faced tough competition from Alex Borres, who is the candidate who made regulating AI the centerpiece of his campaign. Borres quickly became the target of a pro-AI super PAC funded by OpenAI's president, which spent millions in negative ads against him. Altogether, the race drew more than $26 million in ad spending, making it the second most expensive House race this year. Here's what Borres told CNN's Jeff Zeleny earlier today.
If they win, they're going to gloat. They're going to go to every member of Congress and say, hey, if you try to regulate us, we're going to end your career. But if we win, they're going to have to rethink their strategy, and I think you're going to see a lot more courage from members of Congress.
Courage for Congress. Interesting. My panel is back along with tech correspondent for the New York Times, Mike Isaac. Mike, you've been covering this race. You just heard Borres say the results are going to send a message to candidates calling to regulate big tech and AI. Will that be the case? Are we going to have courage in the future?
Yeah, look, I think it probably stings for folks who are waiting for just a giant sort of bottom-up populist pushback, especially after so much money really flooded into this race from Leading the Future, this OpenAI adjacent super PAC. But I think one point that at least I've taken here is Borres really became almost a media spectacle after all of this money started flooding in and the AI sort of pro-AI folks really targeted him. So there was kind of a momentum that was brought on by this whole thing, even if he did lose, if that makes sense.
You're right, because there was also millions of tech dollars spent in favor of Borres as well, and including that from funding from Anthropic, actually, as well. Borres' opponents called him out for that very point. But could this race be seen essentially as a kind of proxy war between the two big players in AI?
Yeah, 100%. Like there was this third or really third and fourth little super PACs that emerged during this. That one of them was OpenAI, one of them was Anthropic, and then there was another one called Guardrails, which is more small dollar donations. Then another billionaire doing some more donations. So I do think it is really like a sort of battle of alignment, if you will, on where you stand on where AI should be in all of this. And Leading the Future, the preferred candidate from Leading the Future, the pro-AI super PAC seems to have won, but we'll see how that plays out and if this actually becomes a real, litmus test from where folks stand across the country or not.
Let's expand out to my panel here, because what Congressman Jamal Bowman mentioned, he talked about affordability more than once. People oftentimes will link that to obviously being able to have a job, one that has an income that is actually going to give you a livable wage. And it's really obviously talked about for AI. And there was a new poll that came out that found just 16% of adults think that AI will have a positive impact on society in the next 20 years. Just 14% of young adults feel the same way. And of course, speaker after speaker was booed at recent graduations who even dared to mention AI. So is this issue too distant in the future for people, or is this right here and those who are running ought to take note?
Oh, it's right here, and I think it's only going to continue to pick up steam. I think it will probably be a dominant issue in the 2028 presidential election. Look, you only have to look at the battle over data centers and how over the last 2 years you've seen Democratic governors who were embracing data centers with open arms in their states have now issued moratoriums saying that they're not going to allow the building of data centers in their communities until further studies are done. So the politics on this, is moving rapidly, is picking up steam. And if you think about it, I mean, AI touches people's lives in so many different ways. There's the anxiety about what's going to happen to jobs, how the economy is going to be transformed. There's this data center question of, what it means in your backyard. This is, generating a lot of NIMBY concern. There's concern about misinformation, information flow.
Talking to our kids.
It is talking to our kids. I mean, it is almost a 360-degree issue. So no, it is not losing steam. And I do think that just thinking about this race, it's also, I think, worth noting. We were talking about Mamdani and endorsements. Last year was Nadler's endorsed candidate. Jerry Nadler's very popular. And so I think, it's not for nothing that his endorsed candidate, prevailed here too.
And he also backed AI guardrails as well. It's not as if he was like, this
certainly
was a free for all.
Certainly.
But I couldn't.
State versus federal.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I couldn't agree more that the issue is with us right now. I do think that there is a narrative, if somebody is able to craft it, around the positive things that could come out of AI, the productivity gains. Yes, it's going to be disruptive, but here's how, as a country, we're going to rise to the challenge. We're going to innovate, and we're going to make the most of it, and it's actually going to be good for us. And I just haven't seen anyone take that opportunity.
The more that these candidates are aware of AI and know AI, the better, because I think a part of the problem, too, is we have a lot of legislators who are completely scared of AI. And then AI, doesn't want people who have no idea what they can do, how they operate, regulating them. That becomes also a problem in this capitalistic market. So love it or hate it, it's here. It has good implications. It has bad implications as well, kind of just like everything. But I think it's important that a lot of these new candidates coming in are aware and they know about AI and they will know how to regulate it for the American people. That's a good thing.
President Trump was talking, I want to hear your response on this. President Trump was speaking with Mark Caputo the other day, and he was asked about regulating AI. Listen to his response.
It's going to be for the good, and we're watching for the bad. I think the good, let me put it a different way, the good far outweighs the bad. We are going to find the bad, and we're going to stop it.
You have the power to use the Defense Production
I
Act
have a
potentially.
power to use a lot of things, yeah.
Would you consider using the Defense Production Act to possibly regulate or control AI or AI?
I would, but I'm not sure I have to do that. I think so far it's been very responsible.
What do you think of his response? Is his approach what Republicans think is appropriate or ought to be?
It sounds like oddly reminiscent to the way that Trump framed his opinions on crypto just a few years ago. And that's why I think it's such a massive mistake that AI is inserting themselves into these Democratic primaries right now, because just a few years ago, you had Democrats who were at least open to the idea that crypto could have some sort of economic benefit, that there would be some sort of way that crypto could be used for a positive. And I think right now we're having this national conversation about whether there's going to be shared benefits or harms from AI. And you have AI inserting themselves into the Democratic primary in a way that the only result is going to be the Democratic Party shifts away from AI and becomes, opponents of AI. And I think, it's nice while Republicans are in power right now to be lifting up Republicans or lifting up the pro-AI candidates. But when you're in a general election, when Democrats are back in charge, the hammer of regulation is going to come down hard on that industry if they start turning, their ire towards Democrats in these primary races. If they start inserting themselves like crypto has.
A lot more ahead. Mike Isaac, thank you so much. Still ahead, it's going to be your turn to drive the conversation. Text us your questions and comments at 818-972-7272. The panel will answer them next. Plus, the president heading to the Hill tomorrow will face some of the very same Republicans who just voted to make sure he can't restart his war with Iran.
Voter ID, which is proof of citizenship, etc. We have to pass it. So we're going to have to talk about that and many other things.
I bet. President Trump is heading to Capitol Hill tomorrow to push Republican senators to pass his controversial elections bill. He mentioned it, the Save America Act. But there might be more tension in the room than he had anticipated, because the Senate just voted to limit Trump's war powers in Iran for the very first time. And it did so with help from 4 members of the Republican Party, his own party. And Trump is not happy with them. In just the last hour, he posted they, quote, provided aid and comfort the enemy. 4 Republican losers voted with the Democrats, and Iran asked my people, what does that all mean? These senators have just made my job more difficult, but I will get it done one way or the other, because I always get it done. My panel is back with me. All right, tomorrow is a big day for the president. He can't possibly think he's not going to have tension and pushback. This is an unpopular war. People have many questions about the agreement that we still don't have details on. But Kate, the White House is calling this resolution meaningless, saying it doesn't even carry any force of law. But it's still a stunning rebuke for this president.
Yeah, from a party that has been very, very hesitant to rebuke him, essentially at almost any turn. So it is a clear indicator of how unpopular this war is, just how much pressure these Republicans feel like they're getting back home in their states. And I think across the board, we've seen the Trump administration fail to explain effectively why we got into this war, fail to define the terms of success, and then fail to be able to deliver consistently on a plan to get us there. So, it may be meaningless in the sense that it doesn't carry the weight of law, but it is certainly, it should be a giant red flashing warning sign for Trump and the White House about the unpopularity of this war.
Is there any hope Trump can change the mind of the skeptics who've already been outspoken publicly, which has not always been the case?
Yeah, I mean, anytime President Trump goes to Capitol Hill, usually good things come out of it. He gets what he wants in the end or brings people together. And I think, this is just, President Trump is one of the only presidents, certainly in my lifetime, that was willing to deal with Iran. They needed to be dealt with, and he is doing that. Look, he has a signed document. That's something Obama was never able to do. The Strait of Hormuz is opened.
He tore up the signed document that Obama put together.
The Strait of Hormuz is opened, and Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. That is really good for the safety of the world. That is really good for the safety of Americans. And I think also in terms of the Save America Act, when he's going to go to Capitol Hill tomorrow and discuss that, it is widely popular. 68% back it, 66% of independents, and nearly half of the rank and file Democrats are behind that as well. It's popular with the American people. So I think some really good things can come out of his meetings tomorrow on Capitol Hill.
I have to say, you said not in your lifetime. You were alive during Obama, right? Wasn't there the
He
Jason
sent pellets of cash, but he got nothing done. Iran still had nuclear weapons.
What's being
Well,
done now
I
is
think
different?
I have to say, inspectors were able to go in and ensure that they were not, enriching uranium in a way that was going to create a nuclear weapon. I mean, we're basically exactly back to where we were when Trump tore up that deal, except we've now spent hundreds of millions of dollars and lost lives, and gas is much more expensive for people across the country.
And now Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz
Gas
forever.
prices are now coming down. So that is
I do have to say, I think the problem is, and I think this is why he's getting pushback not only from the isolationist wing of the Republican Party, but also from more hawkish Republicans, is that he did do something militarily historic. He did degrade the regime militarily. He took out top levels of the Iranian regime. And then he took all that leverage and, per the points of this MOU, squandered it because he's about to unlock billions of dollars of cash for the mullahs in Tehran, and that's going to go ahead and enrich their proxies. That's my concern with this deal.
Mr. President, eat your Wheaties. Capitol Hill is coming for you tomorrow. Maybe. I have viewer questions right now. Jane from New York says, what happened with Dan Goldman at this Poetica coffee shop? Was uncalled for and has actually turned me off from voting for anyone connected to the Dem Socialist Party. There has been a visceral reaction to what took place with Dan Goldman. I wonder if there's going to be a conflation of that behavior with the movement.
I don't think the Democratic Party necessarily has to own everything that a private business decides to, turn away someone's business. I don't think that that's within the Democratic Party's remit to control. I do think that it was uncalled for. I do think that it's an unfortunate reaction to a very emotional and enraging situation going on with Israel. But as Mamdani said in response to this, it's not necessarily the kind of thing that we should be precluding people from enjoying businesses because they have to take a certain political stance.
Public accommodations investigation might be forthcoming. Zach from Omaha, Nebraska asks, do we maybe think that Republicans and MAGA have tried to demonize democratic socialism because they are so scared of its winning message? I don't think the country is afraid of that word anymore. What do you think?
There's never been a better time to be a socialist in the United States of America than now. And I can't believe I'm saying that, but there is an open lane for them to carry their message far and wide. And to me, it's frightening, but I also know that their policies are notwithstanding. They will not be able to hold them up in this great United States of America.
We shall see. Success is already tonight, 3 for New York. Joel from Pennsylvania asks, will Mamdani's success tonight mean future Democrat Party success nationwide? What do you think, Kate?
I think, as we were talking about earlier, I mean, I think New York is unique. It is uniquely liberal. But I do think that there is, what Mamdani has been able to do in New York is energize a segment of the population that has been disillusioned with the Democratic Party, that has not been energized. And so if he is able to continue to tap into that sense of energy and to do it, we were talking about this in the break, in sort of a happy warrior, optimistic way, then if that's turning out young people who have looked at the Democratic Party over the last 10 years and said it's not for me, then that's a good thing for the party.
What's that saying? If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. I guess it doesn't apply politically according to this panel. We'll see. Garrett from Florida asked this question. Iran, one of the worst U.S. foreign policy deals in many decades. Will this end Trump's hold on the Republican Party? What do you think?
I think it's going to depend a lot on what the president can salvage from the current situation that he has on his hands. Again, he's given up a lot of leverage in this MOU. He's unlocking a lot of cash for a regime that has proven, even in the past months, executing political dissidents, that they have not changed, that they will continue to carry out their evil agenda.
We will see what happens tomorrow on Capitol. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. And, of course, for my panel as well. Always great to have you guys here. It's almost midnight, which means it's time for some levity. Thank God. And tonight we'll get some from the World Cup tourists discovering America for the first time.
I wanted to be the superior Frenchman snob, but then I ate the beaver nuggets. I don't know what is in them. I think it's sugar, butter, and pure methamphetamine.